as British travellers tried to enter France. Dr. Mark Shanahan, international relations expert at Reading University, says there really shouldn't be any surprise that after Brexit, crossing the Channel in the summer is going to be time-consuming.
We had a just-in-time system. We've added the friction of post-Brexit checks, customs checks for everybody, freight and passenger travelling through these ports. That means for every car going through, 3 times as long to actually ingress or egress the port. When you add all of the additional traffic that comes from the first weekend of the school holidays, it was always a problem likely to happen. And given that the government hadn't added any particular infrastructure, had really probably under-anticipated the issues that were going to come, the system was always likely to fall over.
The French are now suggesting that if Britain wants the delays to dissipate, it should join the Schengen zone. But the government in London asserts that France is deliberately slowing border patrol processes as retribution for the UK's departure from the EU. The main news again, citing gloomy and uncertain conditions, the IMF has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and the next. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, was scrapped after the moderator fainted 30 minutes into the event. And in a speech in Washington, Donald Trump has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to run again for the US presidency. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
This week, the Forest Service rolled out a brand new Smokey the Bear campaign in which the popular mascot burns to death. They say they hope the shocking turn will get people serious about preventing forest fires for once. The new campaign depicts Smokey the Bear noticing a family leave a flame unattended. Before he can put it out, the entire forest is consumed and Smokey dies in agony while trying to fight the blaze. Despite educating the public for over 70 years, the Forest Service says wildfires have only gotten worse and it was time to take their warnings to the next level. The new ads aim to show that if Smokey the Bear can be killed by the very type of fire he works so tirelessly to prevent, it could happen to anyone at any time. So what's next for the long-running campaign? Well, now that their primary spokesperson is out of the picture, the Ad Council says the PSAs will shift focus to a new character named Little Brian. He's the boy whose family caused the fire in the first place, and he's grappling with crippling guilt over Smokey's death.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. Welcome to the show. You are welcome to join us and take control of the airwaves here. The number for you, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you tonight, it's Ian.
And Aria.
Of course, you can bring up absolutely anything you want. Coming up here tonight, we got some news about, well, it's not good news, but about how people are handling the economic circumstances, what with inflation continuing to record highs for the last 4 decades, almost into double-digit territory if you believe the government numbers. And, of course, the reality is it's probably already well into the double digits. That's just the numbers they don't publish. So we got that coming up, but also we want to start with people and their fear. Aria, you have a story about Americans, more than half are apparently living every day in fear of various different scary things.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because, I read headlines like this, no place to hide, 52% fear they're in danger every day, even at home. And I'm like, what are these people talking about?
I don't know if it is weird. I think that this is what people are trained to do. They are trained to be fearful little animals well, I'm sure you're going to go through a list. I have not read the story.
I suppose so, but I mean, like,
I'm going to go off the top of my head here. Again, having not read the story at all, climate change. A lot of young people are afraid of climate change. There was a whole other story we never even got to. It's just too lengthy. All about how Generation Z or whatever, and maybe the millennials as well, are stressed. They're anxious and worried about what's going to happen with global climate change. And then, of course, there's terrorism.
That's such a silly thing to worry about, though.
I agree with you. It's ridiculous.
Even if it's real, whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and you, little individual, cannot do anything about it, so just roll with it.
That's all you can do. But that's not the view of a fearful person. You and I don't have that particular view.
Fair.
So there's that. Of course, the government's been ginning up fear about terrorism for 20 years. I don't know if that made it to the list, but of course, for some time, that was one of the fears. Economic woes and concerns are definitely, people are afraid of how they're going to make the bills, get the bills paid at the end of the month as things keep getting tighter and tighter. So there's those things. There's COVID and the fear about getting infected with monkeypox or, whatever the new thing is that's out there. This is what the state thrives off of, right? They say war is the health of the state, but also fear is the health of the state.
Yeah. See, I can certainly understand, the fear, economic fear and uncertainty, and I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. I'm falling behind on bills. I've got a mountain of debt or whatever. I understand that's at least a realistic fear, right? Mm-hmm. But I suspect that most of these, that's not what it's going to be talking about.
All right, let's get into it.
So 1/2 of Americans feel like they're in imminent danger at least once a day. That's certainly not economic fear.
I mean, if you drive a car, you are in danger, because there could be some lunatic that comes over the median and just smashes right into you, and you're dead. So, I mean, that's a legitimate concern, but you shouldn't live in fear of that because, well, then you'll never get in the car and go to where you have to go.
So a new poll of 2,000 Americans analyzed how they feel about their personal safety and found 52% feel on edge every day. Younger Americans. On edge, yes.
I just can't even imagine.
Every day.
I mean, you and I, we've got hundreds of years in prison between the two of us that we're facing in the next few months with the Crypto 6 trial, and I could see why that would cause somebody some concern. But just to go about your daily life of going to work and, whatever other responsibilities you have to do to be on edge, have that sensation is just, unbelievable to me. I mean, what would cause me to be on edge is if there was like an active shooter in the vicinity or something like that. I would then be on edge and be, very aware of my surroundings. But let's go on. I want to hear what else they're afraid of.
Younger Americans were most likely to feel concerned about their safety on a daily basis. Again, a daily basis, with 75% of those between 25 and 34 agreeing with the statement, compared to just 50%.
75%?
75% of people ages 25 to 34 felt concerned about their safety every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. Dark streets and sidewalks trigger their anxiety the most, followed by neighborhoods they aren't familiar with.
Should we remind these people that violent crime has been, in the last few decades, going down?
I don't know that it would do any good.
It's less dangerous out there, generally. Well, I mean, there are bad neighborhoods and there are better neighborhoods and all that. I'm not going to say that there aren't still bad neighborhoods. But violent crimes in general have been going down over decades. You are safer than ever to walk from one point to another anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know what world they're living in. Neighborhoods they aren't familiar with. It causes them anxiety. Next in line were parking garages and riding alone in a rideshare or taxi. Yeah, speaking of rideshare services.
Hold on. Do they give percentages for the taxi? Or are they just okay. What's the percentage?
Speaking of rideshare services, 39% of respondents completely avoid them because they don't feel safe taking them. They mean like Ubers and stuff, right?
Yeah,
they don't feel safe taking Ubers?
Does that mean that they walk everywhere, or that they are feeling safer with a cab driver than they are an Uber driver?
It included taxi and rideshare drivers together.
Did it? Okay.
And that number jumps even higher to 50% for those between 25 and 34. So half of millennials are too scared to get in an Uber or a taxi. How the hell are these people getting home from... I can't either.
Okay, so to answer your question of how they're getting home, they're talking probably to city people in this case, right? We don't know. They did say Americans, so I'm sure there's some rural folks in there. That's probably the part that's not afraid, right? So presuming they're talking to some number of city people here, they're getting on the subway. They're doing public transportation because other people are around. They don't have to be in a car with another person where they might have to make conversation with somebody.
Oh God, the horror!
Or be, molested or shot to death by them. Because there have been a few stories over the years about some murderer who becomes an Uber driver or whatever, and because they've never murdered anyone before or never been caught murdering people before, then when they kill their first person in the Uber, well, it's a surprise, and so therefore Uber's background check process, which you do have to go through if you become a driver for Uber or Lyft, they do put you through a background check, and they won't even let you drive if you've got like a weed felony. So it's not like they're letting violent felons or whatever drive these Ubers.
Are these people really that crazy where they're like, I don't want to get in my Uber in case he turns out to be a serial killer?
What else could they be afraid of besides conversation?
I don't know. That's just...
He's going to give you a bottle of water and let you plug your phone in. I mean,
that's an absurd fear.
It's insane. I can't.
We were taught our entire lives not to get in the car with strangers, right?
Danger.
Because they could be, serial killers or whatever.
But this stranger has a 5-star rating from hundreds of riders. Some guy took the risk of riding in this guy's car the first time, and he made it. And then, so if you're really worried about it, don't ride with somebody that's got less than 4 stars, and you'll probably be fine. In fact, I think Uber actually has a system where if you have lower than 4 or like 4.3 or something, there's like a certain number, 3.6, whatever it is. If you go below that, you get put on hold and frozen. You can't drive anymore. Like they will. There are no 2-star Uber drivers. There are no 3-star Uber drivers.
56% of people share their... So it also asked, in addition to what they're afraid of, it asked them for tips and tricks on what they use to make themselves feel safer.
Oh my God, I don't even know if I can handle this.
56% share their location with someone just in case.
This is all Americans, right?
Yes.
Okay. I got to get this, the crosstabs on this, because I definitely want to see the demographics.
Gen Z and millennial respondents were the most likely to use that tactic, with 62% of those between 18 and 24 and 65% of those 25 to 34 sharing their location with someone.
Wow.
Now, there is one person who shares their location with me, but it's to make my life more convenient because this person travels a lot, and it's useful for me to know when this person's in the area, when they're in, it's Mark, and when he's in the United States and when he's not, it's useful for me to know that sort of thing.
He's not doing it because he's worried about being abducted or murdered or something like that.
And I have some friends on Snapchat whose location that I see because that's how Snapchat works, but it's not like a constant thing. And if they're not on Snapchat, then it just shows me wherever they last opened it. It's not this live location monitoring nonsense. And it's certainly not for anyone's safety. There is more.
Oh, I want to hear it, and it's just hard. It's really hard to fathom living like these people live. This is not living. This is just fear. That is not a life. There's more coming up here. You can join us and share your experiences. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
When a lunar observatory detects a radio broadcast originating from Proxima Centauri, the nations of Earth discover their first contact with an alien race may also be their last. With the Proximans facing an extinction-level disaster, Earth must choose between sending a ship on a multi-year journey or allowing nature to take its course. Saving Proxima, a hard science fiction thriller by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson, from BaneBooks.com.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better, too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at mymagicmud.com. FTL20 mymagicmud.com.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically 2 types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. Do you live in fear every single day of your life?
And it hasn't even mentioned COVID.
No, it hasn't yet. When you get out of bed, are you on edge throughout the entire day, worried about everything from your cab driver or Uber driver killing you or raping you or something, to being afraid of terrorism or, like you said, COVID or whatever other fears we're going to get to? We've just scratched the surface of this poll, and I just have a pet peeve here of news, quote-unquote news companies talking about polls and then not actually linking to the data. It is not available in any of the stories that I found. The one polling company that did this has not, at least from what I can see, linked to their own poll from their own website.
No, the article that I have links to one poll, the company who did the poll, but it just goes to their homepage, which is completely useless.
I looked around on there and I checked their blog, and it hasn't been updated since mid-June. So there's this one is not there. There's something they have some content there, but not this one. Arlo, which is the company that hired one poll to do the poll, I'd not heard of Arlo, so this other news article links to Arlo. It's a home security corporation,
which makes them a little bit untrustworthy in regards to this poll.
Well, I mean, one poll looks like a legitimate, polling agency, and they did talk to 2,000 Americans.
Sure, but are they asking sort of loaded questions, or are they asking fair and honest questions?
That's a good question, and you don't really know exactly what they asked if you don't have the poll data in front of you, and otherwise we just have to trust what MSN or studyfinds.org is saying about the poll. It's like, well, if you guys saw the poll, why don't you link us to it so we can see it too? There was a poll that came out last week, late last week, about secession here in New Hampshire, the first ever secession poll, and the folks over at the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence put out a little summary about what they thought was important about the poll, and I wanted to write up my own piece for nhexit.us and Free Keene, but I wasn't just going to go on what they said.
Right.
I wanted to go on what the actual poll numbers that I can see in front of me said, and luckily that those numbers were available from the group that did that survey, but not in this case. But that said, it is still fascinating. I find it plausible, Aria, because this isn't the first story about younger Americans and their tendency to be anxious, and we don't need to read studies about this to know that. In our own lives, I've known younger people who have been expressive about their anxiety. That is this like common thing amongst, for lack of a better term, millennials or Generation Z, younger people. It didn't happen when I was growing up. When I was in school, no one ever talked about being anxious. I'm sure some people were, worried about taking a test or asking a girl out on a date or whatever. Anxiety obviously happens, or nervousness, whatever you want to call it, happens in certain circumstances. But these are people who live in an anxious state, and they exist, and they are common. And so I find these numbers to be completely believable. But let me go to Major Payne. He's on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Hey, yeah, this is as I was telling you on the call, and this is what I call a byproduct of snivelization. We're all snivelized. Bunch of damn. If we were all dogs, we'd be Weimenheimers. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm gonna coin a phrase here. I think might be applicable to the situation. We're suffering from amerophobia.
Amerophobia?
Amerophobia. Yeah, you're scared to be who we're supposed to be.
Who are you supposed to be?
The whole world's turned upside down. America don't know what it is anymore.
What is America?
I don't know anymore.
Okay.
When I was a
so
kid,
America's having an identity crisis?
I'm freaking clueless in Seattle, baby, living in Michigan. Don't ask me.
Well, I hope America kills itself. Thank you for the call tonight, Major. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. I think what he was referring to is, home of the free, land of the brave, and obviously living in fear is not conducive to taking brave actions.
No, but I want to speak up for millennials on this one. I don't know about Gen Z, but I know a lot of millennials.
As the millennial in the room.
I was raised more like Gen X, so I was being left alone by myself, like, hey, just don't open the door for strangers, you'll be fine, that sort of thing. Yeah. But most millennials weren't raised like that. They were raised by helicopter parents who wouldn't let them out after sunset, who wouldn't let them walk to the park to play by themselves and things like that.
That's where some of this comes from, for sure.
I suspect that they have trauma that's deeply rooted in how they were raised to just constantly be. I was never told not to get into the car with strangers, right? Because that could be very bad advice for someone. The subject just never came up. I don't think I was never actually told, don't get in the car with strangers, because what am I doing on a day-to-day basis where that's even a possibility in the first place? But millennials, on the other hand, most millennials were told from the time they were born, don't trust strangers, don't talk to them, you're going to meet them on the internet, don't trust them, don't ever meet them in person.
That was true when I was young as well. There was stranger danger, and you don't want to talk to strangers unless your parents are around, kind of thing. So that's been around for a while, but I think that it's gotten worse over time, and the whole idea of the helicopter parent, I didn't hear about that until the mid-aughts when we were doing Free Talk Live, I think maybe as a local show in Florida. And
I suspect those are the younger millennials, right?
And those people, certainly, they must have existed in the past, but there's just been this trend in society towards that kind of parenting, the kind of rounding off of corners, the childification of America, keeping kids childlike for as long as possible and in need of a parent.
But destroying their childlike innocence in the process, right? Traumatizing them like Greta Thunberg and all of these other people, that terrorizing them with the fear of COVID and climate change and all of these other things. Doing all of these things to keep them safe as kids while simultaneously destroying their childhood.
Yeah,
by traumatizing them.
The fear, like implanting that into their minds, is really just so destructive and so sad. And now
it's infectious.
Now they turn into adults, and they aren't getting better.
No, of course
they're
not.
literally living in fear of an Uber driver. Let's hear some more from this ridiculous survey.
So we were just talking about how how millennials in particular, 62% of them, or 65% of millennials aged 25 to 34 share their location with someone just on a regular basis.
Here's where I am, just in case.
Yeah, that's crazy. Respondents also revealed the top things they'll have on their person for safety and peace of mind while traveling. The most popular items are pepper spray at 40% and a personal safety app on their phone also at 40%.
I wonder what that is. What's a personal safety app? Is that something that automatically shares your location with certain people?
I tend to think of something like Cell 411, but I know that's not what they're referring to. So I don't know what they're referring. I'm not crazy, so I don't have a personal safety app on my mobile device.
Now look, there's nothing wrong with having some sort of a weapon to defend yourself with. Pepper spray,
Sure.
It's got its downsides. You don't want to be downwind from.
Well, before the government took my guns, I like to open carry.
Yep. And unfortunately, they won't even let us hold on to any kind of self-defense items legally right now.
They made me give up my bow, man.
Yeah, even a stun gun. You can't even have a stun gun. Yeah. The number here is 603-283-6160. Well, our friends can still have these things. They just can't be ours.
Okay.
There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live's video archives have been on LBRY for years. LBRY is an uncensorable, decentralized, blockchain-based media sharing protocol, and we're big fans of it here on Free Talk Live. In 2020, LBRY launched Odysee, a video sharing website to compete with YouTube, and it's really taking off. Now with over 1 million channels, many of whom are disaffected YouTube creators. During YouTube's crackdown for not towing the government line on COVID, the Free Talk Live YouTube channel started receiving strikes and could be completely taken down at any moment. Thankfully, Odysee started offering live streaming, so we're now streaming live every night and posting our video archives permanently to Odysee. You can watch live or anytime on our Odysee channel by visiting video.freetalklive.com. If you want to go all in, download the desktop app at lbry.com, and then every video archive you watch, you'll help seed and keep it online forever. At minimum, we ask you visit video.freetalklive.com and follow us on Odysee today. video.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and 2023. It says the world's economic outlook is now gloomy and uncertain. From FSN's bureau in New York, Sarah Walton with more.
The IMF says GDP this year will now grow by 3.2%, before falling to 2.9% next year. The Washington-based Financial Institute says it's reassessed the international economic landscape because of rising inflation and the continued impact of the war in Ukraine. If correct, it would mark the first quarterly contraction for global GDP since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Russia has announced it's pulling out of involvement in the International Space Station in 2024 and will proceed with a previous decision to build a space station of its own. The move will end cooperation in orbit aboard the ISS that began in 1998. The Russians are rejecting a US effort to extend Moscow's involvement in the space station until 2030. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, had to be scrapped after the moderator fainted half an hour into the event. Kate McCann, the political editor of Talk TV, is said to be well, but doctors advised that the rest of the debate should be scrubbed. Lufthansa, the German airline, has cancelled most of its services for tomorrow amid industrial action by ground staff. Meanwhile, London's Heathrow Airport says ground staff shortages there are the main cause of current disruptions to travel. From FSN's London bureau, Julia Chapman reports.
Heathrow says it has ramped up its operations since November in response to growing demand for flights. The airport has hired 1,300 people in the past 6 months. It says its security staffing will be similar to pre-pandemic levels by the end of July. But recruiting ground staff for roles cut during the pandemic has proven difficult for airlines. Heathrow says there is a 30% shortage of airline handlers. Airports across the UK have experienced significant queues, baggage losses, and delayed flights since the start of the summer holiday season.
The US now leads the rest of the world in cases of monkeypox, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control. There have been more than 3,400 cases reported across America, surpassing the level of infections in Spain. And Donald Trump, back in Washington for the first time since his presidency ended, has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to declare his candidacy in the 2024 race for the White House. He told the right-wing American Policy Institute conference that he has to save the country, which he said was being destroyed by the Biden administration. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us right here. Take control of the airwaves and bring up whatever you want. By the way, big thanks to Libertariat, who is a Free Talk Live supporter, diamond level of our Free Talk Live AMPS program. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. If you like what we do here on Free Talk Live and you want to help support the show, then get some cool perks. You get some benefits from doing that. Go to amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Like Libertariat has done, he's gone way above and beyond the call of duty and become a diamond level. But all we ask for is $5 a month, and really appreciate anybody that helps us out over there. So thank you in advance, and thank you to all of those who have already done so over at amps.freetalklive.com. So it's Ian and Aria here in the studio. We've got more. Aria, you've got more to share from this study on Americans and their apparently near constant state of fear. Over half of respondents.
Yeah, I'm saddened because it doesn't really specify what things Americans are afraid of. It just clarifies different ways in which they are afraid. And there's still more to
the
come.
Uber drivers. They're apparently afraid of that. But yeah, that's why I wanted to find the actual study, and I'm disappointed that it's difficult to acquire. But first, let's go to Stephen. He's in Georgia. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hey, so I want to call out the Franklin County, Tennessee government.
Okay.
You were being watched. You were being monitored. We know who you are. You're probably not listening to this, but I think everybody should call there and just let them know that they are scum.
What they do now?
5-6 days ago, one of my coworkers went there. Went to the college there, went to a frat party, got drunk, got kicked out of somewhere, cop shows up, and he vomits on the cop. He's belligerently drunk.
Hold on. So was he being arrested at the time he vomited on the cop, or just happened to vomit on a cop when the cop just was around?
So he was not in handcuffs, but when you listen to what was being said, they had pretty much made the decision they were about to put him in cuffs anyways.
So are they now charging him with like biological attack or is some sort of nonsense like that?
Yeah, some sort of involuntary or some sort of voluntary transfer of human bodily fluids.
Good Lord. Is there a lawful version of that? I guess so, like a blood transfusion or whatever.
But here's where it gets really upsetting. So in Tennessee, they have 24 hours to give you your first bond hearing. They denied it because he assaulted a police officer. That was their
by vomiting.
Yes.
Okay.
So his second guaranteed bond hearing was yesterday. So I go there because he's a coworker. If they give him bond, we're bailing him out. We need him at work. We're undermanned. We need him. So I'm going to bail him out. We're going to deal with the money later. They put him real close to the last. I'm not sure why, but I'm sitting in that courtroom. And there's a gentleman who I don't know if there's any connection, but one of the bailiffs there, his last name was Hamill, and one of the guys there that was being put on for his bond hearing got booked like 15 hours beforehand. So he's been there. This is his first bond hearing. He is there for aggravated sexual rape. They give him a bond immediately.
And what about your buddy with the puke?
So he comes up and they deny him again and say that he is a danger to society because of his lack of respect for law enforcement.
I mean,
wow.
I realize it's not a great argument, but the argument of, hey, I was drunk and vomited does not indicate a lack of respect for law enforcement.
Well, even if it does, like, let's just say that you are being disrespectful of law enforcement. Let's say you did assault this man on purpose and you wanted to give him your puke germ. Can we not come to a complete and utter agreement that raping somebody is vastly worse?
Yes, I think we can agree with that. Yeah, this is pretty common where government gangs treat certain types of defendants totally differently. A lot of times violent people are cut out. We had somebody call in last night and give an example of this. I think it was somebody who went to Rikers in New York City. I forget what the exact violation was, but he defended himself. He used, it was an owner of a convenience store, and he was being robbed, and he defended himself successfully against the robber, and I think took the robber's life by stabbing him to death in that case, and it was a clear case of self-defense, but they went ahead and locked him up in Rikers for some indeterminate amount of time while they're giving people bail the same day for actual violent crimes with a victim that were not self-defense.
Well, New York is weird like that, right? They punish most heavily self-defense because they don't want people to do it.
That's a good point. Stephen, thanks for calling with and sharing that story here tonight. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And look, to get back to tie this into the story you have here tonight, Ari, about people being afraid, the poll that was done by one poll of 2,000 Americans finding that more than half of Americans, quote-unquote, feel on edge, according to the story, every day. Look, I don't blame you. If you live in a bad neighborhood, if you live in a place where there is a high violent crime rate, by all means, be aware of your surroundings and carry some sort of a weapon with you. They do say here that 40% are carrying pepper spray.
Yep.
And there's other non-lethal weapons that you can carry in cities that don't allow the carrying of guns. Obviously, one of the reasons why places like New Hampshire are safer in general is because people can carry guns here, and they do.
They do, but it's also true that, it's good to carry things other than guns, because if a gun is all you have to defend yourself and you go to defend yourself, well, that's it. Yeah. Someone's getting shot at that point. Right. There's no backing down from that. However, if you have pepper spray or something, it doesn't necessarily have to escalate straight to 11, such as, carrying a gun does.
Agreed.
However, I mean, I wish they had asked these people how afraid they are of their government, of the police, of the military-industrial complex, because they're the ones who are the biggest threat to the average individual out there. The average individual is more likely to be killed, I don't know the numbers, more likely to be killed by a police officer than they are, a random hobo in the streets. It probably varies based on where you're at. Like if you live in Chicago, or did I say homo? I meant hobo. Well, it's that too, right? But I mean, if you live in Chicago, you probably have a higher chance of being, a victim of, just random violence. But if you live just about anywhere else that isn't one of these big cities, it's more likely going to be a government agent or something like that. True. So they talk about more people who are afraid. One of the bizarre ones to me, when they meet someone new while linking up, like through Tinder or I don't think anyone uses Facebook dating, but something along those lines.
I've heard people do.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
I know it exists.
Somebody recently met somebody there.
Wow.
I forget who it was, but
good for those geriatric people out there dating.
It was the first I'd heard of it, but yeah, it exists.
I'm just surprised that these people who are this terrified actually meet strangers from the internet in public places at all.
That's a good point.
58% of them do meet in public places, and
that's like basic level meeting somebody. Okay.
Followed by sharing their location with someone. Americans between 25 and 34 are the most cautious when it comes to this, sharing what they do on an average of 5 times a month with other people.
Wow.
And then someone makes a brief statement about that is immaterial. The survey also asked respondents about their safety and the comfort of their own homes, and found 42% of people don't feel safe when they're at home alone. 45% avoid living on the ground or first floors of apartment buildings out of fear of home invasions. I can't imagine being that crazy.
I mean, how often do those even happen?
I guess it depends on where you live, but I mean, if home invasions are common enough,
that don't include the police. I'm excluding the police invading your home because obviously that happens. It's happened here more than once. And there's obviously the swattings, right? Like there's the Tim Pool guy on YouTube. He gets swatted all the time. But like legitimate criminal activity, non-police criminal activity coming into your home, how common is that? Especially in a place like New York City where there's usually neighbors that are relatively nearby. I'm curious. The number here is 603-283-6160. These people seem quite irrational when it comes to the fears that they are living underneath. If you want to comment, you can join us here. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help. PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
This is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends. I've run websites since 1996 and have used over a dozen web hosts in that time. AgristHosting.com is the only one that hasn't broken my heart. Agrist Hosting's uptime and service is stellar, and their DDoS mitigation is the best I've seen. That's important because if you tell the truth in this world, you'll ruffle feathers. And some people will try dirty tricks to silence your voice. No matter what the haters hit us with, Agrist Hosting keeps our websites online. If you have a mission-critical commercial presence or a world-changing activism site, you cannot tolerate any skullduggery. So go with AgristHosting.com. Have a WordPress or blog site, but you're not satisfied with performance or uptime? Or just want raw hosting? Want to pay with Bitcoin? Agrist Hosting specializes in high-performance hosting with personalized service. Go to AgristHosting.com and click on the button that says Get Hosted. That's AgristHosting.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and the phones are open if you want to join us here. You can. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Arya.
And, of course, you can join us online anytime you want. You can join our social media platform over at social.freetalklive.com. That is where you can interact with other Free Talk Live listeners, and some of the hosts of the show as well. It's a Mastodon-based system, which means it is self-hosted. That means we're running the server, not some big tech mega corporation. So you've got more freedom to express yourself over at social.freetalklive.com. Once again, that's social.freetalklive.com. If you sign up, there is a question about why you're joining the server. Just put a reference to Free Talk Live in there or something like that. Because if it's like a one-word answer and it sounds really generic, you're going to get knocked out for spam.
Yeah, that's just us making sure that bots aren't joining.
And we are doing a good job at that, by the way. I knocked 3 potential bots or spammers out today. So check it out, social.freetalklive.com. I don't know if there's much more to this story, Aria. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight from this fear story?
Perhaps. I mean, 60% of those between 25 and 34, which that is the fearful generation. People aged 25 to 34 have a home security system. And this made me curious, looking at the cameras up there behind you and the cameras that I have at my house, how common those are. It actually specifies that. Now, obviously, those aren't home security systems.
Nope, that's just video surveillance.
But they do exist, and I can't find it now because it's written so badly. But they did break down, people who have camera systems in their house. But it didn't even get the numbers. Never mind. So,
I see 37%, but this isn't for people 25 to whatever. This is the whole range of respondents. 63% have home security systems. So that's, again, all the range, not one demographic.
And 3 of my cameras are pointed at the highway for my own amusement when wrecks happen. Because
they happen a lot there.
And this way I get to see them. And, I can be helpful to people. Like, hey, that guy was following you too closely. Here's a copy of the video. Or whatever.
You could put some online, get some viral video, too, if they're really crazy.
The reason I got it was because people were stealing my signs 2 years ago when I ran for sheriff or whatever. So, I had a legitimate reason then, and now it's just sort of carried over since.
Yeah, the reason we did it here was because we were being targeted by haters in the area who were constantly stealing the peace flag out front.
Yeah, that's not living in fear. There is an identified problem, and you're taking solutions to address it.
So it figures that it's going to talk to people about the poll's going to ask people about, what are their safety measures in their homes, because the company that hired OnePoll is a home security system company. So they obviously want to sell more home security systems. They, they would like to capitalize essentially on fear. And then they get into top places Americans feel unsafe. You already went through, I think, most of these. Public transportation, 28%. Big cities, just being in the city, 28% of them say they feel unsafe.
See, I sort of get public transportation. I would generally feel safe under the care of any governmental organization, including the subway or the city bus or whatever. It's a government employee. It's maintained by the government. The government funded it. They paid for it. They built it. To me, it's going to be lower quality than anything I could find out there in the free market.
Wait, did you say you would feel safe on
less
government?
safe?
Less safe.
Less safe. I may have said safe, but I meant less safe.
Okay.
If you give me the option between a privately owned Greyhound and a city subway bus or a city bus or whatever, I'm going to assume they cut corners designing the city bus. Then they charged 4 times the amount. It came in over budget. It took too long, and it was
You're much more likely to get somebody stealing your wallet on a subway, or touching you inappropriately, or possibly stabbing you. Or like
Sarah said, smoking cigarettes or whatever, because the fares are so low that the homeless people just congregate on them or whatever.
As compared to, say, taking an Uber somewhere, where the driver is much less likely to stab you or steal your wallet or whatever, right? Because they have a rating. They've been there for a while. They've got they're a known quantity, essentially. The fear of being on an Uber is just completely irrational here. And I'm not a fan of Uber. I don't want to make it sound like I'm like a stockholder or something.
See, I like Uber, and I wish I could find out how many times I've used them, because it's probably between dozens and hundreds of times. Between them,
are they still mandating masks?
I don't know. I mean,
because they sucked before that, and that really sucked.
What I learned during COVID, I think I went somewhere with you when we learned this, is that if you put, hey, we'll tip you extra if you don't require us to wear a mask or whatever, then you can get around that.
The rules.
I mean, money talks, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I started doing that, and then I stopped really paying attention. And then COVID went away anyway. But COVID aside, I've taken dozens to hundreds of Ubers, and I have never once been assaulted or robbed or anything by any of my Uber drivers or my DoorDash drivers or whatever. None of it. It's never happened. Completely unfounded fear. You're living a psychosis. If you're scared of your Uber driver, you're insane.
So I think that's basically the poll here. I wish they would have gotten into more about, what specifically people are afraid of, but it seems like it maybe was just focused on city-oriented stuff. I don't think they asked about terrorism. I don't think they asked about, bigger topics. I think they just simply looked at the fear of traveling in a city and living in a city, those sorts of fears.
I suspect that if we did include those sorts of questions, though, it would get so much worse, right? They're in fear. They don't want to stay in their homes because they're scared they're going to get robbed with a home invasion or whatever, but they don't want to go outside because they might catch COVID out there.
Yeah. Somebody in our YouTube chat called NH Guy, presumably he lives in New Hampshire as we do, he says, happened to me last year, talking about a home invasion.
Wow.
Guy was wasted. And I says, well, was he trying to harm you or steal stuff or just too drunk to know which house he was in?
That happened to you, didn't it?
Yes, it happened. That's what I said in the chat here. It said that, we had the latter happen once. A dude just let himself into the studio in the middle of the night. The door was unlocked at the time.
Clearly.
And he just waltzed in here, S-face drunk. At the time, I was a regular wine drinker, so I had a box of wine out in the kitchen. He was looking around, I guess, and found himself some of the wine.
Just in some random house, man.
Yeah, well, I think he knew that it was like the Free Stater house. I think he was conscious of that to some extent, but he wasn't intending to do us harm. He was just drunk and wanted to come in and hang out at the Free Stater house, I guess. And so he
found some wine while he was at it.
He grabbed the wine box, brought it into the studio. I found himself a glass, I presume. He didn't do very well. I don't remember cleaning up the glass, but he didn't do very well with the wine. It ended up, some of it was on the floor, and he was really wasted, obviously. So some of the wine got spilled. He apparently watched some YouTube videos or whatever, because I looked at the browser history after discovering him.
I love this story. This dude just wanders in, helps himself to some wine, sits down at your computer and starts watching YouTube, man. I love it.
Yeah.
That is the most keen libertarian thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and then I get up, whenever I got up, I didn't discover him in the middle of the night. I just happened to wake up for whatever reason. I think maybe I heard something, or maybe just had to get up and pee or whatever, right? But I come out my door and something seemed weird. I don't know what it was that got my attention downstairs, and then I saw this guy just kind of waltz out of the studio, and I said, hey man, can I help you with something? Or something like that. Like, I wasn't hostile or anything.
No, that is I wasn't here for that, but I can 100% imagine you just be as nice as possible, just friendly. Here's some stranger in your house. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Hey, man, can I give you a hand with something?
Yeah.
And just being completely genuine about it.
Yeah,
I love it.
And he was sorry, and and we had a conversation, and ever since then I see him around town from time to time. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have had the best life. He's been picked up by the cops for whatever, petty crimes and that kind of thing. Just being a loser, essentially. But he didn't do anything on purpose to harm us, and just like, whatever.
Yeah.
Just
well, it sounds like he didn't really harm you. He just
made a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, could have been a lot worse, right? So, like, that's the home invasion of New Hampshire, right? Some guy's just too drunk. He doesn't know where he's at, and he just wants to go sit down. That's the worst case in this case. I'm sure there's bad things that happen in New Hampshire. I mean, every now and then somebody gets killed, but it's pretty rare, and most of the time it's the cops killing people around here.
The only killing people that I've heard of in New Hampshire was I think there was a homeless guy here in Keene who died in an accident. I think he fell into a river or something like that.
Well, there was the girl that cut that guy's head off.
That was the other one I was going to, in a lover spat sort of love triangle sort of thing. I don't remember the specifics now, but that one was grisly.
That's a crazy story.
And people do stupid things when they're in love and when they're jealous and
just let it go.
Rage-filled and
just let it go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever it is.
You know, a lot of these people, they don't learn how to temper their emotions when they enter into these relationships, and they confuse passion with love and all these sorts of things. So they think if they're not yelling at you, they don't really love you.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Because they watch that's what they watched on television growing up with Everybody Loves Raymond and all of these other sitcoms where that's what heterosexual relationships was just hating the other person passive aggressively.
Coming up, we got some news about the economy. You and I both had a similar story here, Aria, about people having difficulty just getting the bills paid at this point. The number of Americans that are having that trouble is on the increase. And we'll talk about the economic circumstances, which are not getting better for folks here and also elsewhere in the world. You can join us. Hour 2's on the way. Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it! You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and 2023. It says the world's economic outlook is now gloomy and uncertain. From FSN's bureau in New York, Sarah Walton with more.
The IMF says GDP this year will now grow by 3.2% before falling to 2.9% next year. The Washington-based Financial Institute says it's reassessed the international economic landscape because of rising inflation and the continued impact of the war in Ukraine. If correct, it would mark the first quarterly contraction for global GDP since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Russia has announced it's pulling out of involvement in the International Space Station in 2024 and will proceed with a previous decision to build a space station of its own. The move will end cooperation in orbit aboard the ISS that began in 1998. The Russians are rejecting a US effort to extend Moscow's involvement in the space station until 2030. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, had to be scrapped after the moderator fainted half an hour into the event. Kate McCann, the political editor of Talk TV, is said to be well, but doctors advised that the rest of the debate should be scrubbed. Lufthansa, the German airline, has cancelled most of its services for tomorrow amid industrial action by ground staff. Meanwhile, London's Heathrow Airport says ground staff shortages there are the main cause of current disruptions to travel. From FSN's London bureau, Julia Chapman reports.
Heathrow says it has ramped up its operations since November in response to growing demand for flights. The airport has hired 1,300 people in the past 6 months. It says its security staffing will be similar to pre-pandemic levels by the end of July. But recruiting ground staff for roles cut during the pandemic has proven difficult for airlines. Heathrow says there is a 30% shortage of airline handlers. Airports across the UK have experienced significant queues, baggage losses and delayed flights since the start of the summer holiday season.
The US now leads the rest of the world in cases of monkeypox, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control. There have been more than 3,400 cases reported across America, surpassing the level of infections in Spain. And Donald Trump, back in Washington for the first time since his presidency ended, has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to declare his candidacy in the 2024 race for the White House. He told the right-wing American Policy Institute conference that he has to save the country, which he said was being destroyed by the Biden administration. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the astonishing queues of cars and trucks that brought weekend chaos to the British port of Dover. The UK and French authorities have pointed the finger of blame at one another for tailbacks that lasted 6 hours for some motorists as British travellers tried to enter France. Dr. Mark Shanahan, international relations expert at Reading University, says there really shouldn't be any surprise that after Brexit, crossing the Channel in the summer is going to be time-consuming.
We had a just-in-time system. We've added the friction of post-Brexit checks, customs checks for everybody, freight and passenger travelling through these ports. That means for every car going through, 3 times as long to actually ingress or egress the port. When you add all of the additional traffic that comes from the first weekend of the school holidays, it was always a problem likely to happen. And given that the government hadn't added any particular infrastructure, had really probably under-anticipated the issues that were going to come, the system was always likely to fall over.
The French are now suggesting that if Britain wants the delays to dissipate, it should join the Schengen zone, but the government in London asserts that France is deliberately slowing border patrol processes as retribution for the UK's departure from the EU. The main news again, citing gloomy and uncertain conditions, the IMF has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and the next. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, was scrapped after the moderator fainted 30 minutes into the event. And in a speech in Washington, Donald Trump has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to run again for the US presidency. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
Overburdened with material comforts, America's wealthy can expect another disappointing holiday this year. As Brian Scott tells us, the rich will simply be buying too many things to experience the true meaning of Christmas.
All across the country, those at the top of the economic ladder are denied a privilege that the poorest of the poor take for granted. Rather than fall victim to the rampant consumerism that seems to increase each year, the poor find meaningful joy in simple Christmas traditions, like singing carols to keep warm and hugging relatives who have not yet died. At stores like these, the spiritually bereft must scramble for popular holiday toys in a vain attempt to duplicate the Christmas-time happiness that the impoverished enjoy.
Poor people are grateful for just a roof over their heads or something to eat. My wife and I are both lawyers, so that's not enough for us. Certainly hope poor people don't take what they don't have for granted.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, phones are open, and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Arya.
We started out talking about the fears that people in the United States have, especially those in the 25 to 34-year-old age bracket. Just absolutely irrational level.
I don't know what happened to those people. I mean, I can't imagine how a person becomes that terrified just constantly.
Well, I think you touched on it earlier. It's the helicopter parenting combined with the sort of fear-based inculcation that's going on at government schools, where they're constantly being hit with what they need to be afraid of. And And they touched on this point in the movie V for Vendetta, right? Like, they need to remember why they need us. That was what Creedy, I think, was his name, or whatever the hell his name was.
I don't remember the context of that quote.
Creedy was the security agent, whoever the hell the big boss guy was in that particular movie, the big politician character, the Hitler-looking guy. They need to remember why they need us, and they need to be put in a state of fear. And then we need to be the ones, we being the government, which we aren't, but in the context, right. The government needs to be the ones to provide them the solution. And so before we get into the stories that I've got a few of them about the economy and how bad things are, here's what the government gangs are doing. And this is a clip that I saw on Twitter. The Real Daily Wire posts this.
Is this the New Zealand, that crazy lady?
Yep, that's her. The Prime Minister. She's not just any old crazy lady.
She's the top crazy lady.
Yeah, she's the top of the government food chain over there. And now they don't give us any details. Where is she? When was this?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. There's no context to what she's about to say that could possibly justify it or put it into a light where it doesn't sound that bad.
It seems obvious that it was within the last 2 years, if not more recent than that, because I would think that if this happened in 2020 or 2021, we would have caught wind of it. And we would have played this because we played other clips from this.
Yeah, but there was so much craziness out of
True.
New Zealand and
That's
Australia
true.
around that time that something like this just may have gotten lost in all of it.
It's possible. But now we have it, and it's just over a minute in length. And this gives you sort of the other side of, well, we know they're trying to make people fear, but they also want to present themselves as the solution. They want to present themselves, the government gangs, as the answer, that which people can look to feel safe, and look to for the truth.
The most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information.
No. No, you can't. You cannot trust a government person in any circumstance whatsoever.
Everything
they lie.
the state says is a lie.
They lie constantly.
You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health.
The Ministry of Health. They're gonna
True.
They love using that Ministry of term.
For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear. covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth.
We will continue to be your single source of truth. Dismiss anything else you hear. This woman actually said those words within the last 26 seconds.
I know, and they didn't tar and feather her, which I want to remind everyone does not necessarily cause any harm whatsoever. It's just humiliating.
If it's hot tar,
yes, but it doesn't have to be hot tar. It can be like pine tar, which can just be very sticky. So I'm not saying they should have harmed this woman, but they should have embarrassed her to the extent that she never said anything this evil again.
That's the thing. She's talking to a population of people that are probably just as anxious and just as fear-oriented as the people in the United States. All these Western states or whatever have been inculcating people with fear constantly for generations. And so it builds on itself. We go on.
We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. And so I really ask people to focus on
that. The most egregious example of that appears to be this text which originated in Malaysia and has become a viral hoax in Australia and in New Zealand. How irresponsible is it the people that are sharing that news of a lockdown imminent in New Zealand?
Yeah, and look, that's the kind of thing that adds to the anxiety that people feel.
Anxiety.
Weird. Well, I don't know why they'd have anxiety over COVID-19 and fear and the lockdowns, and that's completely unfounded. There's no history of COVID-19 lockdowns or pandemic uncertainty or any of that nonsense, right?
Well, I think she's referring to anxiety about COVID-19, which, of course, they want people to be afraid of COVID-19.
Right, because then they can say evil things like this, and people go, oh, well, thank God they're telling us the truth.
And they want people to ignore their own eyes. They want you to ignore your own experience. All the COVID-19 fear for the most part, was all on the media. It was all being presented to people. It wasn't so much in their real lives. People were not dropping dead in the streets. People weren't even dying, in our lives at least, very often. Now, there have been some people in the last 2 years that we know of who ostensibly died, quote-unquote, due to COVID.
But I mean, we could have said that whether or not COVID-19 happened. I mean, over a 2-year period, it's extremely likely that some of us know some people who died.
That's the thing. I was going to say ostensibly, and that's what I said, ostensibly to COVID-19. There was a nice gentleman here in New Hampshire. He's a Free Stater. His name was Ken. He ran a great little restaurant, a little barbecue place. They took goldbacks. They took, cryptocurrency. And Ken was very obese, and he was in his mid-60s. And he died a few months ago. It was, I think, earlier this year. And he was in the hospital prior to that. He had allegedly had COVID. But was it because of COVID that he died, or did he just die of, heart condition that he had and have COVID when he died? And then, of course, they chalk it up to COVID, right? So it's really hard to know for sure.
Certainly.
Another guy, Gene, the Christian anarchist, who's a longtime listener of the show, he died a year ago or whatever it was.
I mean, from what we understood, he was reasonably healthy, but he was also
74 or 73 or
old.
something. So he was at the age at which men tend to die. So there's just so much fear out there. Anyway, this is the rest of what Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, has to say.
So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic. Prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really ask people, just visit covid19.govt.nz. It has all of the up-to-date information.
Blah, blah, blah. Unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth.
It's so bizarre to me to have a government employee standing there like, everyone else is lying to you, but we're telling you the truth. I saw something today or within the past few days, that was really pertinent to this entire conversation. Was something. Imagine being so crazy that you think the people telling you to go outside and exercise and to socialize with your friends and family and to eat healthy, eat organic, and all these other things. Imagine being so crazy that you think they're the conspiracy theorists. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who are lying to you and trying to get you to do unhealthy things by telling you to exercise and socialize with other human beings, eat well, stop eating McDonald's, stop eating this overly processed cat food or whatever. And we're crazy because we're encouraging people to go outside and maybe get some exercise, maybe go for a jog or something.
See somebody smile for once, It's absolutely insane. It's why
aren't smiles infectious or something like that?
They should be.
I was under the impression they were. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if smiles. I mean, if you're around more people smiling, you're probably going to feel better.
That's what I would tend to think. Yeah.
So I think so. And that's what they stole from us. One of the things they stole from us is the ability to actually see another human face and see a kind human face.
And this monumentally screwed up kids. I mean, was all of this worth it?
We're only beginning to find out how bad this has harmed children.
I got a friend who works in the public school system here in Cheshire County. At least I don't know exactly what school, but she is constantly talking about how these 17 and the 18-year-olds that they have this mindset that their best years were stolen from them. And to me, that's kind of sad. If you're looking at your high school, those were the best years of my life. I mean, you got to be okay. Yeah. But that's how they feel. They're like, our best years were just stolen from us. And that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives. And the people who are even younger
they can change that
going
belief if they want to.
Sure.
And I think your point is that they should change that belief because high school years are some of the dumbest years.
Absolutely. But there was still time stolen from them that they're never going to get back.
Yeah. And they were forced to live under conditions that they didn't consent to. The number 603-283-6160. But then again, that's true for all of us. 603-283-6160. You just make the best of it. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Brute force, intransigent defiance, adamantine will. These are the hallmarks of the AI tank. These gigantic machines have the firepower of an army, but they also have their own sense of honor and duty. When the world breakers arrive, battle will be joined, planets will shake, and war and peace will never be the same again. World Breakers. Stories from David Weber, Larry Correia, and more. Available August 3rd from BaneBooks.com.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Tempting as it may be to add a couple bucks to your monthly mortgage payment to chip away at your principal balance, don't do it if you have any credit card balance. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Your mortgage is single-digit debt and your credit card is double-digit debt. Keep making the minimum credit card payment and you will never be out of debt. If you have more than one credit card, there are two common approaches. Throw as much money as you can at the card with the highest percentage rate and pay the minimum on others. Or pay off the card with the smallest balance first, then attack next biggest. And if you can, start a new card, one with an introductory zero-rate balance transfer, so you at least stop the clock on what you already owe. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open here, and you can join us. We're talking about everything from the irrational fear that apparently, according to one study, most Americans are living with on a daily basis.
Oh, I didn't want to think about it in the context of most, but it is most
52%,
Americans.
52%, according to this study here with 2,000 people surveyed, so decent sample size. You want to comment on that? You're still welcome to join us here. The number 603-283-6160. We're also getting into some economic-related news because things are bad out there as far as inflation is concerned. And of course, inflation is eating away at people's standard of living. It's harder to make ends meet for families across the United States. Of course, it's not just the United States that is dealing with a constantly inflating money supply. Every central bank all around the world, due to COVID, went crazy with money printing. And so,
this is only going to make people more fearful. As we're watching in big cities like New York City and San Francisco right now, the more poor people become, the more desperate they become, the more likely they are to rob a place or to break into someone's home.
Yeah.
It's still something.
And we were talking about the desperate people just going in and robbing straight out of CVS stores and other retailers yesterday. So again, all that's on the table. You can discuss that if you want. 603-283-6160. Something we really didn't get into in the last couple of weeks is the official numbers for inflation. I touched on it briefly earlier. 9.1%, by the way, was the number for June. And
getting close to that 10% mark.
That's going to be a big number to cross. Now, I think that having looked at the statistics from the past several decades, 10% still isn't going to be a record high. They have had higher inflation numbers in the past, but they've also changed over time how they've calculated these numbers. And I believe one of those changes was made in the 1980s when they recalculated the CPI to be lower than it would have been previously. And so there's some company or some website that has, I think they call it like a shadow inflation number or something. I'll have to look and see if
Would that be like the real inflation? Because I imagine that the actual increase in prices, and again, inflation isn't the increase in prices, but that's how they define it, so that's what they mean here, is considerably higher than 10% over last year. I imagine if you buy a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread or whatever today, you're paying more than 9.1%, which is the number they give in reality.
Yeah, I think the company is called Shadow Stats. John Williams Shadow Government Statistics. And this compares the official CPI with the SGS, which is their, I believe, their version here. The CPI chart reflects our estimate of inflation for today if it were calculated the same way it was calculated in 1990.
So they're not even using the real numbers. They're using the government's old methodology of calculating. I suspect then on that rate it's going to be like 22%. That's my guess.
The CPI on the alternate data series tab reflects CPI if it were calculated using the methodologies in place in 1980. So apparently it's changed more than once in the last 40 years. And in general terms,
this is what accountants call fudging the numbers, and it's generally frowned upon for you to just, we're not changing the values in these columns, we're just changing the way that we're calculating the values. That's deceitful. It's dishonest. It's a way of hiding the truth from people.
So according to this, it looks as though they're saying that, and it's not showing us a detailed chart as far as month to month in 2022, but the numbers are going up on both numbers, obviously, the government number and this Shadow Stats number. And according to the 1980-based number, the current rate of inflation as of June 2022 is over 15%. It looks like it's about 17.5% compared to the government number, which is 9.1%. So not quite double, but close.
Really close to it.
But close.
That sounds like the government. They learn how to make inflation seems like it was cut in half.
Yeah. And if you look at all the headlines, if you look at what they're saying,
how do they get away with that nonsense, man?
The media just doesn't question. Most of the media just does what they're told. They just parrot the government press releases. And that's it. Although, to be fair to some in the media, there have been those clips of that new press agent for the White House. Have you seen her, the black lady that they hired?
No.
They used to have the redhead lady, and then they got rid of her, and they put this black lady in charge. And she's even worse than the redhead. I mean, obviously their jobs is always to cover for the state and to distract and to change the topic. And she doesn't even come close to answering a question.
Really?
They'll ask her a question about inflation, and she'll just go off on something else and just completely try to distract from what the original. She doesn't even attempt to.
I
give
assume
them an
they
answer.
fired the other lady and hired her specifically for that reason.
I don't know.
Like you're getting too close to telling the truth, lady.
They're changing out the deck chairs constantly in these administrations. But it's interesting because what happens in the mainstream press reports, what they'll say is inflation at a 42-year record high or 40-year record high, because they go back to like 1980, 82 in that range. There was also some pretty serious inflation apparently going on at that time. And that's right around the time when they changed these numbers, or 1990, right? They changed between the 80s and the 90s how they did this.
Right.
And so the number that we have today is not equivalent to how they were calculating it in the 1980s, but yet still the number that we have today is starting to, the official number, the 9.1% now, is still as high as it was in like 1982, when the reality is it may be even higher. Or
It saddens me that people are following. This is fundamentally no different from Venezuela knocking off 3 zeros from their currency.
It's not as desperate.
It's not, but it's every bit as deceitful, and it's done for exactly the same reasons, to hide how badly they screwed up the money supply. And just as in Venezuela, no one's questioning it. Everyone's just going with it and assuming everything is fine. The media is not questioning it. They're not doing their job. And no one's sitting around going, wait a minute. This used to be a $10,000 note, when now it's a $10 note.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing going on here in the United States, where, this $100 bill doesn't buy as much as it did 20 years ago.
They haven't gotten to the point of reissuing new currency, redenominations.
It's inevitable, though.
Or anything. It will be a real sad day for the United States when and if it comes to that. They may have some other tricks up their sleeve to try to, deal with these things. But
I mean, this is the trick up their sleeve right now, is that they just change the way they're calculating how screwed up you are as a result of their direct actions.
I'll see if I can find the chart of the numbers from back in the 80s, because I feel like I remember it went over 20%, which would mean that 17% isn't quite to that level yet, but boy, is it close. And they're not going to slow down the money printing, I don't think. So, I mean, I don't think they have any plans to do that.
No, and prices don't go away. So this 17% or whatever, it's on top of that 20% from the 80s or whatever.
Yeah, it's here to stay for sure. Somebody just put in an image on social media that I saw of a lady gassing her car up in the 1970s. I think it was like 1974. And it was 48 cents a gallon.
That's higher than I would have expected, honestly.
Yeah, well, they were still inflating back then, I guess. But still, now it's 10 times more today than what it was back then. The number is 603-283-6160. If you want to talk about the economy, you're welcome to join us here. Again, it's 9.1% according to the official numbers at the Consumer Price Index. But there's also what they call the Wholesale Price Index. And those numbers are in the double digits. In fact, we'll talk about how it's affecting a lot of these companies that are making the products that you're buying. It's Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and 2023. It says the world's economic outlook is now gloomy and uncertain. From FSN's bureau in New York, Sarah Walton with more.
The IMF says GDP this year will now grow by 3.2%, before falling to 2.9% next year. The Washington-based Financial Institute says it's reassessed the international economic landscape because of rising inflation and the continued impact of the war in Ukraine. If correct, it would mark the first quarterly contraction for global GDP since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Russia has announced it's pulling out of involvement in the International Space Station in 2024 and will proceed with a previous decision to build a space station of its own. The move will end cooperation in orbit aboard the ISS that began in 1998. The Russians are rejecting a US effort to extend Moscow's involvement in the space station legislation until 2030. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, had to be scrapped after the moderator fainted half an hour into the event. Kate McCann, the political editor of Talk TV, is said to be well, but doctors advised that the rest of the debate should be scrubbed. Lufthansa, the German airline, has cancelled most of its services for tomorrow amid industrial action by ground staff. Meanwhile, London's Heathrow Airport says ground staff shortages there are the main cause of current disruptions to travel. From FSN's London bureau, Julia Chapman reports.
Heathrow says it has ramped up its operations since November in response to growing demand for flights. The airport has hired 1,300 people in the past 6 months. It says its security staffing will be similar to pre-pandemic levels by the end of July. But recruiting ground staff for roles cut during the pandemic has proven difficult for airlines. Heathrow says there is a 30% shortage of airline handlers. Airports across the UK have experienced significant queues, baggage losses, and delayed flights since the start of the summer holiday season.
The US now leads the rest of the world in cases of monkeypox, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control. There have been more than 3,400 cases reported across America, surpassing the level of infections in Spain. And Donald Trump, back in Washington for the first time since his presidency ended, has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to declare his candidacy in the 2024 race for the White House. He told the right-wing American Policy Institute conference that he has to save the country, which he said was being destroyed by the Biden administration. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. Phones are open here, and you can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, you've got Ian.
And Aria.
And we've been talking about inflation. The official number, CPI, 9.1%. Up, by the way. So there was that 1 month, I think it was April, where it dipped from 8.5 to 8.3%, but then it went back up to 8.6 or something, I think, in May. And now, according to this, the June numbers are now 9.1%. This is the official government number, which has been manipulated over the years. According to Shadow Government, shadowstats.com, they say that the government changed how they calculated things in 1990. And so they look at the old 1980s calculation. They take the same statistics or whatever that the government's using for calculating these things, and they say, oh, well, here's how y'all did it 40 years ago in 1980. And if you did it the same way you did it in 1980...
I mean, that seems like the most reliable way of actually fairly calculating it.
That would be comparing apples to apples.
Yes.
Which is what is not happening now. When the mainstream media reports on the CPI at 9.1%, they say, it's as high as it was in 1982. No. It's actually higher, apparently, than it was in 1982, because you're not comparing apples to or apples to apples. If you compare apples to apples, if you look at the current inflation under the old calculation numbers, according to shadowstats.com, it is currently over 15%. It is at around 17%, it looks like here on this chart. And so I did pull up the historic inflation rate. So looking at the government's own numbers, according to tradingeconomics.com. So they go back all the way to 1914.
Wow.
With these numbers.
All the way back to the foundation of the Fed, essentially.
Yes. And according to the government's own numbers, the peak in 1980. So remember, they're saying it's... Right now, the headlines are, it's at a 40-year record high, because it's higher now than the official numbers were in 1982.
The higher it gets, the longer that time frame is going to get as well.
Correct. And so what was the record high in the 1980s and when it was peaking there? It was apparently in 1980. Now, I'm only looking at a chart that shows all, 80 years or whatever it's been, or 100.
Sadly, it also won't show the cause. What happened in 1980?
It's money printing.
What
else could it be?
Okay, fair. But I mean, what did the government use as the justification for that money printing?
Good question. If I'm sure some of our listeners that are older than we are could give us that answer.
It was Vietnam. Duh.
In 1980? No, that was over.
That would have been. I know. Well, wasn't Vietnam in the 70s though?
Yeah. Vietnam was the late 60s and
the results
early
of paying
70s.
for that would have hit. I would imagine around the 1980s.
Could be, but there's another spike. It looks like on the chart earlier.
Okay.
Than the 80s. So. Anyway, it was 1980, and it looks like it topped out at about 15%. So according to the Shadow Stats calculations, the current number is 17%. Or higher, maybe 17.5%. It's hard to get a real clue from the chart that they're showing here. So that would mean that it's actually higher than it was in 1980, higher than it was in 1970, higher than it was in 1960. And so you have to go all the way back to the other spike. So the only other spike of inflation on this chart that's higher than 1980 would have been, it looks like, just before 1950. I'm not sure exactly what year because it's not one of those interactive charts where you can like hover over it and see exactly where it is. And it went up to about 20%.
But that's what we'd expect post-World War II, that era.
Yeah. So it went up to about 20% on the chart. And we're at 17-something% today, according to the Shadow Stats number.
And that's the number that the government has always used until the 90s when they're like, this inflation thing it's looking really bad. Let's change the equation so that we can lie to people about how bad it really is and they won't have to know.
Unless they changed it in the 1980s as well, or like the 70s. Who knows? I mean, they might have changed it more than once.
I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, there's somehow that the USD has lost something like 96, 97% of its purchasing power. And inflation since then isn't, 1900% or whatever it would come out to be at that rate. So they're doing something with the numbers to hide all of that.
If you want to jump into the conversation, because again, these are just the official government numbers, and we know that probably whatever they were doing in 1980 was probably still manipulating the numbers and massaging them.
No, they weren't telling the truth.
Right. So what you should consider the government number is the absolute bare minimum. It's not the truth. The truth is somewhere higher than that, but it's the amount they are willing to admit to. And so now we know what that is. Now the official,
and then on top of that, they're lying about what inflation even is. So they're just
that's right.
They're not lying just to lying about how bad it is. Yep. They're lying about what it is. They're saying that it's the increase in prices, and of course that's not true.
No.
The inflation it's one of the causes of the increase in prices.
Correct,
the actual inflation is just them printing money out of the blue. It's them counterfeiting the money that you're using in your life.
Wholesale prices. So they have the two different numbers. There's the CPI, that's the consumer price index, and then there's also the wholesale or the producer price, the PPI. That is up to 11.3% in June. So, of course, anybody knows, like, if the wholesalers are paying more for the products, eventually those prices are going to go up at the grocery counter or the department store checkout or wherever it is that you're going. So,
or the portions are going to get even smaller.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. They're really they're really slimmed down as it is. But so again, all these numbers just keep going up. So how do companies deal with it? Well, we know they do shrinkflation, or that's kind of the term for it, where they shrink the quantities and
they can't get away with that anymore unless they take the toilet paper approach, where they give you now it's 6 boxes of cereal for the price that it used to be 5 boxes, but in reality it's the equivalent of 4 boxes, or toilet paper math is what I'm calling it these days.
Well, don't forget they also can make the squares smaller on the toilet paper. They can do fewer numbers.
Didn't Kleenex do that or something like that?
I'm sure they've all done it.
I seem to recall we covered it where, like, Kleenex, they took a half an inch off of each one, and it no one noticed, but it increased the amount of Kleenex that they had to sell or whatever.
Yeah, and of course they keep the price the same. So these are all ways that they're dealing with it. But after you've slimmed down the Gatorade bottle so far that people are starting to notice it, you're going to have to raise the price, because government isn't going to keep, like we said, they're not going to slow down the inflation. So at some point, you cannot slim it down any further, and you have to start raising prices. So what's happening? They're starting to raise prices. According to DNYUZ, which is a website we learned actually copies stories, so apparently it was from originally in the New York Times.
Yeah, but they don't monetize it in any sort of way. They don't have a social media page that they're trying to direct people to.
They just want the information out.
Yeah, and good on them for that.
Yep. So New York Times. A day after Walmart warned investors that its profit would shrink as rising prices forced shoppers to make fewer purchases at its stores, Unilever, the consumer goods giant whose products line retailer shelves, reinforced that message.
See, that's scary because I've never heard, I think I've heard of Unilever, but I can't think of any specific product that they make.
There's a good chance it's one of your shampoos. They do a lot of that kind of stuff, but they also do food products as well. They got a U logo. It looks like it's filled with germs. It's a really weird-looking logo.
I mean, I don't doubt that at all. That's sort of my point, how terrifying that is. This company that,
huge.
I've never even heard of makes half of the stuff probably on Walmart store shelves.
On Tuesday, the maker of Dove soap, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and Hellmann's mayonnaise said it raised prices until they were 11% higher than in the same quarter last year, offsetting a 2% decline in the volume of things that consumers bought. It was the fourth consecutive quarter in which prices outpaced volume growth at the company. Unilever raised its forecast for revenue this year, but said its profit would likely be at the bottom of its expected range. They said their costs, driven by an increase in the prices of plastics, palm oil, aluminum, and other commodities, would rise by 4.6 billion euros this year, more than 3 times its costs last year. That's the most important takeaway here. This company, who is only raising prices 11%, is saying their costs are now 3 times what they were last year.
Pretty significant. And what's the cause of that?
Yeah, what is that going to mean? Well, it's for a variety of things, right? So there's inflation, but then there's supply chain issues and, difficulty getting products from one country or another.
Like Ukraine or Russia, perhaps.
Or China, where just sometimes, like Shanghai, we're going to shut the whole city down for 3 months. Good luck getting a shipment out of there. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. This is pretty crazy stuff going on out there, and you can share your experiences here with us on Free Talk Live.
The Shire Free Church offers a sanctuary to those seeking an escape from state churches.
The Shire Free Church is an interfaith, diverse group of people that may not share identical theological beliefs.
As a member in or minister of the Shire Free Church, you are a sovereign individual and may be the faith of your choice.
We don't claim to have all of the answers.
We are open to all peaceful people.
We want to learn from each other.
What unifies the Shire Free Church and its diverse members is peace,
love,
and liberty. There are many paths to God, one for every individual.
The Shire Free Church does not define a specific path beyond these parameters that must be your foundation.
Peace as your way.
Love as your guide.
And liberty as your light.
Learn more at church.shiresociety.com.
That's church.shiresociety.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and the phones are open here. You can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We're talking about inflation. We looked at the numbers and compared the official numbers of today with what the official numbers would have been if they used the calculations that they used in the 1980s. It's Ian and Aria in the studio tonight. You can join us and bring up whatever you want. In fact, we asked aloud why, because you and I, we're on the younger side. I'm in my early 40s. You're in somewhere in the 30s range, Aria, as I understand it.
Yeah.
We weren't really, I was barely breathing, when the 1980 inflation spike happened, where it went up as high as apparently 15%, according to previous charts.
There was a gas shortage then as well, right?
That was in the late 70s, if I recall correctly. But luckily, we have Rick on the line.
Oh, good.
Calling from Tennessee. He was around during those times. And Rick, you wanted to share what you believed the causes were from your experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will. Be glad to do that.
Thank you.
And to be fair about it, yes, oil prices were out of sight. Mm-hmm. There was also another side issue. There was a big issue in Russia with the wheat. There wasn't much of a harvest, so there's a big supply shortage there. But guys, the biggest thing that caused that whole fiasco, I can sum it up in 2 words. His name was Jimmy Carter. He was not as bad as President Biden, but he was pretty damn close. He was one of the worst. He's the worst president in my lifetime until Joe Biden.
Wow.
He wanted to ration gas. He wanted to step in and do what liberals always want to do. They want to throw money at the problem. Social spending. Jimmy Carter. That's exactly what caused it in the 1970s. And a lot of people just about lost everything they had.
Well, if you actually have money, throwing money at a problem is, generally a good way of making those problems go away. It's at least a way of making problems go away. The issue with the government is that they don't have any money. They have to counterfeit the money that's out there in order to, pay for these things, and that just makes everyone poorer.
Well, what was the reason? Obviously we can say bad president, but what were the excuses that were being used at the time for the money printing? Like, during COVID, it was COVID, war, right? So during, the previous Bush and Clinton and Obama, it's ongoing war in the Middle East. So what was the excuse during Jimmy Carter? Oh, did we lose him?
That sounds that way because, there was a lot of background noise when we had him.
Sounded like he was on the road.
What I'm getting here is that it was. I'm curious now. So, what caused the early 1980s recession and all of that sort of stuff? It's going to take me a minute to actually find the answer through all the fluff that this article throws out, but.
See what you can dig up.
It's the same sort of question that we had with the Great Depression. What caused the Great Depression? Where did all the money go? Suddenly everyone is poor. What the hell happened? And we see the same thing in the 1980s, and we see the same thing today. What caused all of these things? And there's no one thing you can point to and say, see, that was what caused it.
Well, what causes inflation is printing money. And so we know what causes inflation. The question is, what was their excuse? What were they telling people of, here's why we need another, it wasn't trillions of dollars back then. They didn't print near as much back in those days. But, for the however many hundreds of billions or tens of billions or whatever it was that they were printing up.
It was an increase in the unemployment rate from 7% to about 10.8%. So, roughly 50% more than it was. And it was the oil crisis. And that's what they keep citing as the biggest driver of inflation back then, was the oil crisis. And I can imagine, there was an oil thing going on. And so the government was like, well, we're going to print a bunch of money to solve this problem. And that was what actually caused, the inflation. But they're blaming the oil crisis that happened back then, and that seems to be the answer that they're going with.
All right. If you want to weigh in, you can join us here. The number 603-283-6160. We were talking about the official numbers. They're out 9.1% CPI for June, 11.3%. And so now what is going to happen, I think it's expected this week, Aria, the Federal Reserve is going to respond. And they're going to do likely the same thing they did last month, which was raise what they call the basis points. And this starts to get into the world of finance that I get a little, confused. I'm not a financial expert.
Our eyes just sort of glaze over.
But as I understand it, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, my understanding is the more the Federal Reserve raises these interest rates, so they have a certain interest rate that they charge, and I believe it's the banks that have to pay that rate. So the more they raise that rate, the more the banks are going to raise their rates.
Right.
And so therefore...
Because the bank is borrowing it from the Fed at, 0.5% or whatever, but they have to make that back from you.
Correct.
So they have to charge you 0.7% or 1% or whatever.
Exactly. And so now it's much more than 1%.
Well, that's if you have excellent, 850 credit score.
Not even. The mortgage prices are going up quite a bit. It's going to slow down this crazy housing market. You remember last year, people could put a house on the market and it's gone in 5 days. Right?
I've noticed that.
And people were bidding on houses or bidding wars. Prices were going up above what the asking prices were. You're going to start to see that change because, mortgages are getting more expensive now.
It's already changing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's already changing because the feds have already raised rates, I think, twice this year. And they've raised them at I don't know if it's record forever kind of rates, but record raises, but very large raises, as I understand it, 0.75 basis points, I believe, is what they did last time. And they're talking apparently about doing another 0.75 this month. So that hasn't gotten official yet. We don't know. Maybe it'll be half a point or whatever, but maybe it'll be a whole point. Who knows?
What a lot of people don't realize is that this is not going to it's not going to undo inflation. And inflation is like a balloon, right? This number that we're talking about, that's how fast they're pumping air into that balloon. Just because they slow that number down doesn't mean they're letting any of that air out. The balloon's still getting bigger. It's just getting bigger at a slightly smaller rate.
But they lie to people on this issue, and they say, all the media talk about the Federal Reserve and changing these interest rates or raising these rates is the Federal Reserve is ready to fight inflation by raising interest rates. And
they're one of the primary causes of inflation.
Yes, they are the primary cause.
Oh, I don't know. With the reduction of the fractional reserve to 0%, I think a lot of the average banks out there are probably causing quite a bit of inflation themselves these days.
I see what you mean when the banks are issuing loans, they're creating it out of thin air.
Right, and now they no longer have to have any reserves.
Okay, that is a factor. There's no doubt about that. But anyway,
But the U.S. government is still spending way more money than anyone else, and they are borrowing it, I think, from the Fed in return for Treasury notes, and it all gets very stupid and very confusing.
Yeah, okay, so maybe that's where the point is coming from when they claim that they're going to fight inflation. Maybe because rates are going up, banks aren't going to be making as many loans, and so therefore there won't be as much bank-created inflation happening. But of course, the government's still going full bore. They're still we need another $1 trillion for Ukraine. Right? So, there's always some new explanation, some new excuse for ongoing money printing way beyond whatever they have budgeted for. So that is what is not going to slow down, regardless, because those interest rates do not affect what the government does, as I understand it. Those are only for private loans, right? If I'm wrong about that, please give us a call. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. But there's already signs that the housing market is slowing down. We've heard from people who are in the real estate business who've said that there are more people that are bailing. So they were looking to buy a house, or they were under contract or getting close to getting under a contract or whatever to buy a house, and then the rates went up. Like, okay, well, now I can't afford the mortgage, so I'm not going to buy this house, and they back out of the deal, even sometimes losing money because you put a little bit of money up front.
Yeah, but better to lose, $30,000 now instead of $300.
Not that much.
But instead of
a few $1,000 or something like that. But
I want to know what's going on with the used car market, because they're all up as well, like something to 50, 60, 70%. I've heard that I've heard that it's because it's more difficult to get newer cars now because of the supply shortages and all of the chip shortages and that nonsense. But still,
well, plus people are, if they're cutting back, if it's getting more expensive to live, if you were able to afford a new car, maybe you're not able to afford a new car now.
That's also true.
Maybe some people that were on the edge, people that were leasing previously, now they want to buy a car, but they can't afford a brand new car, so they go and they buy a used car.
Well, there's almost no benefit to buying a brand new car in the first place. I mean, it's just a fashion symbol at that point.
All right, so the number here, if you want to join us, it's 603-283-6160. You can take control of the airwaves here. So we had just started a story up about big companies like Unilever, which is a major, mega corporate food and bathroom product kind of manufacturer, and we're looking at the story here about what are they doing, how are they dealing with the situation that is presenting itself with incredible inflation. And apparently, according to Unilever, their costs have risen 4.6 billion euros, which is more than 3 times its cost last year. That's insane.
It makes you wonder how they're getting away with only 11% increase in price.
Yeah, so they're going to be passing higher prices on to shoppers, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, and you can share your experience if you want to jump in here at 603-283-6160. You can take control of the airwaves on Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. That's Bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and 2023. It says the world's economic outlook is now gloomy and uncertain. From FSN's bureau in New York, Sarah Walton with more.
The IMF says GDP this year will now grow by 3.2%, before falling to 2.9% next year. The Washington-based Financial Institute says it's reassessed the international economic landscape because of rising inflation and the continued impact of the war in Ukraine. If correct, it would mark the first quarterly contraction for global GDP since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Russia has announced it's pulling out of involvement in the International Space Station in 2024 and will proceed with a previous decision to build a space station of its own. The move will end cooperation in orbit aboard the ISS that began in 1998. The Russians are rejecting a US effort to extend Moscow's involvement in the space station until 2030. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, had to be scrapped after the moderator fainted half an hour into the event. Kate McCann, the political editor of Talk TV, is said to be well, but doctors advised that the rest of the debate should be scrubbed. Lufthansa, the German airline, has cancelled most of its services for tomorrow amid industrial action by ground staff. Meanwhile, London's Heathrow Airport says ground staff shortages there are the main cause of current disruptions to travel. From FSN's London bureau, Julia Chapman reports.
Heathrow says it has ramped up its operations since November in response to growing demand for flights. The airport has hired 1,300 people in the past 6 months. It says its security staffing will be similar to pre-pandemic levels by the end of July. But recruiting ground staff for roles cut during the pandemic has proven difficult for airlines. Heathrow says there is a 30% shortage of airline handlers. Airports across the UK have experienced significant queues, baggage losses and delayed flights since the start of the summer holiday season.
The US now leads the rest of the world in cases of monkeypox, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control. There have been more than 3,400 cases reported across America, surpassing the level of infections in Spain. And Donald Trump, back in Washington for the first time since his presidency ended, has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to declare his candidacy in the 2024 race for the White House. He told the right-wing American Policy Institute conference that he has to save the country, which he said was being destroyed by the Biden administration. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the astonishing queues of cars and trucks that brought weekend chaos to the British port of Dover. The UK and French authorities have pointed the finger of blame at one another for tailbacks that lasted 6 hours for some motorists as British travellers tried to enter France. Dr. Mark Shanahan, international relations expert at Reading University, says there really shouldn't be any surprise that after Brexit, crossing the Channel in the summer is going to be time-consuming.
We had a just-in-time system. We've added the friction of post-Brexit checks, customs checks for everybody, freight and passenger travelling through these ports. That means for every car going through, 3 times as long to actually ingress or egress the port. When you add all of the additional traffic that comes from the first weekend of the school holidays, it was always a problem likely to happen. And given that the government hadn't added any particular infrastructure, had really probably under-anticipated the issues that were going to come, the system was always likely to fall over.
The French are now suggesting that if Britain wants the delays to dissipate, it should join the Schengen zone, but the government in London asserts that France is deliberately slowing border patrol processes as retribution for the UK's departure from the EU. The main news again, citing gloomy and uncertain conditions, the IMF has cut its global growth forecast for the rest of this year and the next. A TV debate in the UK between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, vying to be the country's next Prime Minister, was scrapped after the moderator fainted 30 minutes into the event. And in a speech in Washington, Donald Trump has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to run again for the US presidency. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
The entire nation has been transfixed by the emotional saga of missing toddler Aaron Crawford. Police remain baffled by 4-year-old Aaron's mysterious disappearance. The Crawford family is finally speaking out, but it isn't easy.
We're taking it day by day, you know? We just miss our baby so much.
This must be so hard on everyone.
All he does is cry. I hate him.
Little Aaron was last seen in the bedroom he shares with his older brother, Denny. Authorities say he was abducted by an intruder in the middle of the night.
Denny was in the room when Aaron was taken. Yeah, right here. Now it's just my room.
Denny, can you tell us what happened?
I was in my room. A man lifted up the window and came in.
Were you scared?
Yes, because I thought he's going to take my Xbox.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the third hour here. We got time for you. If you want to join us, bring up anything you want. Share your thoughts on the economy with inflation at what appear to be record highs for the last most of 100 years. Not quite. If you go by the shadow stats number that we were looking at earlier. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Aria.
We're talking about what is happening as a result, of course, of inflation as prices tend to go up. Because remember, prices rising is a symptom of inflation, as you were pointing out earlier tonight, Aria. A lot of people in the media do not understand this. I don't think the media is personally lying about it. They are simply propagating misinformation that they believe to be true.
Well, they don't know what they're talking about. It's not, I mean, like a year and a half-ish ago, we got raided, and the union leader guy, or WMUR, I don't remember, some news crew was out here, and they referred to fiat currency as flat currencies. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, they don't know what fiat currency is. Of course, is currency created by fiat, that is to say
decree.
The decree of the king. That's where that term came from. In this case, it's the decree of the federal government. Let's go to your phone calls, though, and we'll talk more about prices going up. But first, Bob is on the line in Tennessee listening to WGOW
yes, sir.
Chattanooga.
I remember back in the 70s when gas was being rationed in Florida, and you could only buy 5 gallons at a time. Otherwise, you couldn't get gas. And if you had to go on a day that your tag didn't end on, then you had to stand in line with a 5-gallon can, and that's all the gas you could buy.
Wow.
See, that's a bad idea. That sort of thing, it always causes a shortage. Always. You've got to let these gas station owners increase prices to lower people's demand. Because a lot of those people probably didn't really need 5 gallons. They just bought it because they could. And because, if I don't get it now, but if it was $15 a gallon, that gas would have been there for someone to use to take their grandmother to the emergency room or whatever.
Right. Well, the worst part about that Carter got, he got the responsibility for was, I was living in Central Florida, and the house there that was a brand new house that was like an octagon house on 5 acres of property was only $52,000 at that time, but the interest rate was 18%. Nobody could buy the house.
Yep. Yeah, and I think last I heard rates were at like 6%, and if the Fed increases the interest rates this month, they're going to go up, and I don't know how much high. I don't know what a raise in the basis points equals to a raise in the end consumer rates. I don't know how that all shakes out.
Yeah.
So according to the Wikipedia here, Bob, the 1973 oil crisis began in October when members of OPEC, the Organization of Arab Petrol Exporting Countries led by Saudi Arabia, proclaimed an oil embargo. It was targeted at nations that had supported Israel during the Yom Kippur War, which were Canada, Japan, the Netherlands, the UK, and the United States. So because the United States got involved in other people's conflicts around the world, people in the U.S. had to suffer because they couldn't get gasoline.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of fun either.
I bet it wasn't. How long were some of those lines you waited in?
It was some of them were they were blocks, and you had to. This was in Miami, Florida, so you had to stand in line with the cars, in the line with the cars, in burning hot sunshine for hours to get 5 gallons of gas.
And burning gas at the same time, right?
Right.
You said this happened in 1973?
That's when it began.
73 or 74.
And yet it took the United States more than 30 additional years for them to say, hey, we shouldn't let ourselves get in this position again where, these OPEC nations can, just arbitrarily decide they're not going to sell us gas that we need anymore.
We were walking right back into the same thing that Jimmy Carter walked into during that time frame, and that's why Carter got blamed for it, and that's why Biden's getting blamed for it now. I need to ask you a question about Bitcoin, if I can.
Sure, go ahead, Bob.
I was listening to a program the other night, and they said that this basketball player got his salary paid in Bitcoin, and by the time he got through paying all the penalties and taxes and stuff like that, he got like $34,000. Have you heard anything like that?
No, I haven't heard anything about that. So
I've heard of several athletes, like Tom Brady. He's a huge Bitcoin advocate. I mean, his social media profile still had the laser eyes that, people did for Bitcoin hitting $100,000 purse. I mean, he receives part of his salary in Bitcoin. There were a few other football players as well. I don't know about basketball players, but what you're referring to sounds like a sort of capital gains tax where they flip it back into USD and they have to pay based on, some amount of percentage that they earned off of or whatever, but that only applies if they sell the Bitcoin for USD, and it sounds like this particular athlete may have done that.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened. See, I don't understand all this stuff. I just trying to figure out how in the world could something like that happen to somebody.
Well, let me recommend go to bitcoin.com and click Get Started at the top of the page and take a few minutes to watch some of the introductory videos that they have there. I think the first one's 3 minutes long and give you some basic info about cryptocurrency and why it makes an impact on the world and what it makes it so different from the government money that we have. But if I had to speculate on this, and I did find a headline here about a gentleman named Cade Cunningham, who apparently plays with the Detroit Pistons. The story came from August of last year. He said he's going to be paid in Bitcoin. And
nice.
And so this may be the person you're talking about. It could
probably is.
It could very well be that they figured out how much this dude got paid, as far as what he was being paid, his salary, and they figured, well, okay, between now and then he got this much, and so he would have gotten this amount of Bitcoin. And there has been a crash in the price of Bitcoin since late 2021. And so it's down from around $68,000 per coin to about $20,000 right now per coin. So, I mean, we're talking about it's worth a third, less than a third of what it was worth just, a year ago or half a year ago or whatever.
And $100,000, it seems kind of low for an NBA player, but if he's only taking part of his salary in Bitcoin, like 10% or something like that, those numbers could very well make sense.
Yeah, there's a lot we don't know about the situation, Bob, but what I would say is if you are accepting pay or a portion of your pay in Bitcoin, if that's something you choose to do, the best thing that you can do is just hold on for the ride, because you don't lose until you sell. As far as if you're getting into Bitcoin for the money, for the investment purposes, which in my opinion is the wrong reason to get into it. It's a fine reason or whatever for most people, but for us it's all about the better form of transaction without having a middleman. To me, that's the real benefit, is you cut out the middleman, you cut out the banks, you cut out the governments from the picture of money, from that product, if you will, and that means it's a better experience in general. You don't have to ask anyone's permission to send somebody anywhere in the world, whether it be somebody down the street or somebody in China or Japan or wherever. You can send a payment to them, and you don't have to go into the bank. You have to show ID. You don't have to beg for permission. You don't get it denied. It goes through. And it's done in a matter of moments. So that's the benefit.
And if you're interested in getting into this, you don't have to be an NBA basketball player going to your team manager or your coach or whatever and be like, hey, I demand a portion of my pay. You don't even have to tell your employer you're doing this. Go to Wage to Pay. I think that's the number 2. I don't know, because I only learned about this after I was prohibited from using cryptocurrency.
Is that where they take a direct deposit and they turn it into
They
Bitcoin?
give you direct deposit information just like any other checking account. It's got your account number, your routing number, all of that. You give that to your employer, and most of them allow you to have 3 to 5 different direct deposits. Some of them going into a savings account, some of them into a checking account. Well, you can just make one of this one of your accounts, and they can automatically send like 1%. 2%, 50%, whatever much percentage you feel comfortable with. and it can automatically turn that into cryptocurrency that gets deposited directly into your wallet for you. So you don't have to ask your employer to pay you in Bitcoin. You can make sure that you get paid in Bitcoin all by yourself.
And the point you made, Aria,
All
about
by yourself.
Yep, and the point you made about being comfortable is important. You always want to put in whatever you can afford to lose. So don't take, if you can't afford to lose your whole salary, don't take your whole salary in Bitcoin, because
that's a terrible idea.
The price can be a little crazy sometimes, and for most people that's hard to handle. But if you put in just something that you can afford to lose, maybe $20 or $50 a week or whatever you can afford, if you would have spent it on alcohol or eating at a fine dining restaurant or something, you put that into Bitcoin, just hold on to it and watch what happens over time. It's tended to go up over the last 14 years that it's existed. It's quote-unquote down right now, but it's only down to 2020 levels. So if this were 2020, we would all be cheering about the record highs. Thanks for the call, Bob. I appreciate hearing from you, man. Definitely appreciate the thoughts there from Tennessee. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
When Monster Hunter International discovers one of Isaac Newton's wardstones being auctioned off, they decide to steal it and use it to destroy the Chaos God once and for all. But a mysterious thief upends their plan, and it soon becomes a race against time as something much older and infinitely more evil awakens in the jungles of South America. Monster Hunter Bloodlines by New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia and Baen Books. Visit monsterhunternation.com for more.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open here, of course. That's what we do. It's 603-283-6160. And as I mentioned before, Bitcoin.com is where you can go. If you want to learn the basics about Bitcoin, just take the time and click Get Started. It can seem from the outside like this unattainable goal, like it's way too confusing. It's all full of new concepts. And there are new concepts, but it's not particularly complicated from a wide perspective. If you want to get into the guts of it, it's going to get complicated, like how the programming works and all the math or whatever, the engineering. I don't know how all that stuff works. And you don't need to know. I don't need to know, right. All I need to know is the basics. What is decentralization when it comes to transferring value? What happens when you cut out the banks and the governments from the picture of money? Those are some of the basic concepts that you can get down. Just go to Bitcoin.com, click Get Started at the top of the page, and then you can go as deep into the topic as you want to, as you feel comfortable with. And it's a fascinating study. It's a fascinating world, and one that you really ought to spend some time on if you care about freedom.
When we say learn about Bitcoin, we don't mean that you need to learn how the technology functions and all of that stuff. We just mean, you know how to use your debit card. You know how to keep your debit card safe, how to use it to withdraw cash or whatever. That's what we mean when we say learn about Bitcoin. And we mean the Bitcoin equivalence of learning how to swipe your debit card.
Yeah, how to use it as far as commerce is concerned, because that's what it was designed for. The Bitcoin white paper talks about peer-to-peer electronic cash, and that's what it was supposed to be. Now, there's a whole long conversation about the original Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, and they do cover some of that over at Bitcoin.com, so you can take your time and check that out. We go to your phone calls and thoughts. Thomas is on the line, listening online to LRN.FM in Indiana. Go ahead, Thomas.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
Welcome. You're on the
I heard you guys talking earlier about the inflation back in the early 80s and the fuel crisis in the mid-70s. One thing is the fuel crisis in the mid-70s had started, OPEC had formed, and they clamped down, and gas had hovered around anywhere from 15 cents to 25 cents for decades, I believe, before that, and it had shot up, to around 50, 60 cents, and that was, unbearable at the time. And, and then at the same time, Richard Nixon had put a price freeze on fuel and some other items, and so it really just led to a perfect disaster.
Wow.
Yeah, it took a lot of years to get out of it. I'd seen fuel raise and drop several times since then. I'd seen it as low as 60 cents a gallon as late as 1998. But
well, again, a price ceiling is always going to be a bad idea. But what caused the need or the desire for Nixon to put in that price ceiling in the first place was the U.S. involvement or support for Israel in the Yom Kippur War.
That's what it says here, and of course
that sounds believable.
Totally, and that's what that was what the founding fathers warned people against, was getting involved in foreign entanglements. And yet, ever since World War I, the U.S. has just been picking sides and taking sides, and there's a price to pay. Not just the human lives,
wars of alliances.
Yep, not just the people that die in those wars. That's the obvious price that gets paid.
Yeah,
but the fact that, according to the story here at the Wikipedia article, by the end of the embargo by OPEC, again, it started in 1973. It ended several months later. It looks like it started in October of 73. It ended in March of 74. The price of oil had risen nearly 300%, going from $3 a barrel to nearly $12 per barrel. And as you pointed out, Thomas, that meant on the streets going from 12 to 15 cents a gallon to 4 times that amount, or 3 or 4 times that amount. And so it really hurt people. Anything else you want to share?
Another thing to remember during the early 80s about with extremely high inflation, another thing that was going on was astronomical interest rates at the same time. And that had the U.S. in a bind, and I guess it was the recession put in under Paul Volcker, who was the Fed chairman under Reagan. I guess Carter may have appointed him, but he somehow made some recession that supposedly, lots of people lost their life savings, but supposedly that put the damper on inflation for
right. Weren't there
years.
stockbrokers killing themselves, jumping out of windows and stuff back then?
Yeah, I did hear about some of that.
Yeah.
In the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was a Great Depression sort of thing.
Just not as many of them in the 80s, but yeah, there were a few of them.
Thanks, Thomas, for the call tonight, man. I really appreciate hearing from you, and thanks for the the info from back in the day. Definitely appreciate it. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
It certainly seems to be that way.
Yeah.
I mean, they just changed the equations a bit to make it seem like, oh, it's not actually as bad as it was back then, but the numbers are lying because the equations are lying.
Right now it's Russia and Ukraine instead of Israel and whoever the else was in the Yom Kippur War, I guess Saudi Arabia. So just the stage changes, the performers change. Now it's Biden and Trump instead of Nixon, who was a Republican.
I really hate those Biden did that stickers that people are putting on gas pumps because that's such a childish view of the world to think that Biden, who's been in office for a little over a year at this point, has actually meaningfully affected the value of gas prices. You might as well blame Sylvester Stallone for the gas prices Well,
it's always been a childish view that one man is the responsible party for everything that the federal government does, as though the president has any. I'm not excusing the terrible things they do. They do, and they do have some effect.
Yeah, but there's this massive bureaucratic web behind them that's responsible for that nonsense.
Yeah, they don't know what the regulations are. They don't know what the bureaucrats are doing. They have no idea. They're just chilling in the White House. Biden's like trying to put his diaper on or whatever.
Trying to talk to the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, trying not to fall off his bicycle. So back to the story here, a little bit more from, this was the New York Times as featured at dnyuz.com, about Unilever, the big corporation that makes all kinds of products you probably don't even know. Passing higher prices on to shoppers has led some to buy less or trade down to cheaper store brands, Unilever's results suggest, a trend also seen in Walmart's financial reports. To keep its higher-priced brands in consumers' minds, Unilever said that it added 200 million euros to its marketing budget in the first half of the year, another factor that put a dent into its profits. Quote,
that's surprising. I'm amazed based on their product lineup that they have to do any marketing at all.
They got to keep people with them. They got to keep people from switching to the generics.
Well, they are the generics, like Swab.
No, they're advertisements.
Swab shampoo is as generic as they come, isn't it?
They have advertisement. They have marketing. They have to keep you with Swab. They keep people with Swab because the price is low. But if there's a store brand that's $1 cheaper, people who didn't buy that before, who are squeezed on price now, are going to try the store brand.
See, in my mind, Swab shampoo has always been the store brand.
It's not. It's a private company that manufactures.
I mean, I get that, like Great Value or whatever, or Equate or whatever, is the store brand. But
and in many cases,
Swab shampoo isn't like top shelf designer shampoo.
It's not. VO5 isn't either, which is another one that Unilever owns. So, but the fact is, even low-priced brands are feeling pressure from people leaving their product. I mean, tends to be that customers are loyal, right? Like if you like a certain brand, you stick with it. But if you can't pay your bills, then all of a sudden you're looking at the Great Value. You're looking at the generic brand that has no logos or whatever because they have zero advertising budget. They don't have a brand. They're just there on the lower shelf. They're basically the same stuff made by the same company, but with a different label on it. And a lot of people are going to look at that now, and they should. It's Free Talk Live.
Carl Watner, longtime proponent of a voluntary society, died last December. You may have seen his articles published on his website, voluntarist.com, in his newsletter, The Voluntarist, the Mises Institute, or elsewhere over the last 40 years. His newest book, I Must Speak Out, Volume 2, The Best of the Voluntarist, is now available via Liberty Under Attack Publications. This 430-page second volume spans the years of 2000 through 2020 and includes articles by Carl Watner, Wagner, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Carl Hess, Benjamin Tucker, George H. Smith, Lysander Spooner, Pete Eyre, Joyce Brand, and many others. I Must Speak Out is for the newly initiated, the veteran voluntarist, or anywhere in between. Buy the book now at libertyunderattack.com/voluntarist. For more great content on building a voluntary society and for Carl's extensive archives, check out voluntarist.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Donald Trump has offered the clearest indication yet that he's planning to declare his candidacy in the 2024 race for the American presidency. Appearing in Washington for the first time since he departed the city shortly before President Biden's inauguration, Trump addressed a right-wing conference hosted by the American Policy Institute.
If I renounced my beliefs, if I agreed to stay silent, if I stayed at home and just took it easy, the persecution of Donald Trump would stop immediately. It would stop. But that's not what I will do. I can't do that. A much simpler life. Have to save our country.
In that speech, the former president called for the death penalty to be imposed on drug dealers and urged the deployment of the National Guard to cities with high crime rates. Heathrow Airport says staff shortages in airline ground handling are the main cause of current disruptions to travel. The airport, which is one of Europe's busiest, says its punctuality and performance has improved since a cap on passenger numbers was imposed earlier this month. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
Heathrow says it has ramped up its operations since November in response to growing demand for flights. The airport has hired 1,300 people in the past 6 months. It says its security staffing will be similar to pre-pandemic levels by the end of July. But recruiting ground staff for roles cut during the pandemic has proven difficult for airlines. Heathrow says there is a 30% shortage of airline handlers. Airports across the UK have experienced significant queues, baggage losses, and delayed flights since the start of the summer holiday season. Earlier this month, Heathrow set a cap for airlines, preventing them from flying more than 100,000 passengers through the airport every day. The airport reported adjusted losses of $385 million in the first half of this year. Julia Chapman, London.
U.S. stocks lost ground Tuesday following a disappointing forecast from retail giant Walmart. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
Walmart has cut its profit guidance for the year, citing rising food prices and inflation causing consumers to cut back on goods like electronics. The retail giant closed down over 7.5% on the news, dragging down other players in the sector too. The Dow Jones closed the day down 0.7%. The S&P slipped 1.2% and the Nasdaq fell 1.9%. It's a busy earnings week, but investors are also eagerly awaiting the conclusion of the Federal Reserve's two-day policy meeting that kicked off Tuesday.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talking about the economy and the terrible situation with inflation. It is getting worse, and prices have to go up because that's what happens when they inflate the money supply. Corporations are dealing with it as best they can. Unfortunately, they've been shrinking down product sizes, and at some point that's got to end because the inflation ain't giving up, and you can only shrink the product so far, so they're starting to raise prices, and that's what is being covered here partially by this New York Times story, looking at Unilever, Walmart, and some other big corporations, seeing that their costs are dramatically going up. Apparently, Unilever's costs rose by 4.6 billion euros, and that is more than three times its costs last year. So tremendous increase in prices are coming. They're keeping it as low as they can. They're actually, in some cases, losing profit because they don't want to hit their customers all at once with these big increases. And
well, they can't lose money forever.
No, they're not losing money. They're lowering their profits.
Profit. Okay. Yeah, I misunderstood.
Yeah. The challenge is...
They can do that probably a fair bit.
According to Alan Jope, Unilever's chief executive, in a statement, he said, quote, "The challenges of inflation persist and the global macroeconomic outlook is uncertain." So
he's not wrong.
Yeah, and he's not just talking about the U.S. Global macroeconomic outlook. A sign that premium brands can in some cases retain customers despite higher prices came from Unilever's ice cream division. And they got a lot of ice cream brands. We were looking at the Wikipedia earlier off the air just to see all the different brands that they have, like Klondike, Dove, Breyers, I think was...
That makes ice cream. They make pretty good chocolate. Or they make acceptable chocolate. Okay. I wouldn't want to call it pretty good. I wouldn't put my name next to the word Dove as pretty good chocolate, but it's acceptable.
Unilever's ice cream division was one of the few categories to record volume growth. Separately, in a similar vein, another chocolatier said Tuesday reported better than expected sales and profit growth for the second quarter, pushing its stock up more than 4%. So why are people buying more ice cream?
Because they're depressed, because their lives suck.
That's exactly right. That's my guess.
The government locked them in their houses for the last year and a half to 2 years, and they attended dance parties online with their cats or whatever, and then they finish doing that, and they have a glass of wine. They go, "Oh my God, this is the worst day of my life," and they
just down a whole pint.
Yeah,
right there.
What else are they going to do?
Walmart stock was, they could exercise.
They're also not even getting laid. So, exercise would have been better.
Walmart stock was down 9% in pre-market trading. The retail giant's warning it would need to continue marking down inventory that wasn't selling because many shoppers are shifting to cheaper, lower-margin products. So it's like we were talking about earlier. A lot of customers are leaving their brand loyalty behind, and they're saying, all right, I'm willing to try the store brand and see how it is. Might suck, but it might be okay. A lot of times,
in general, they're just fine.
A lot of them are fine. That's true. Sometimes they suck.
I mean, Sam's Cola? No, it's no Coca-Cola and no Pepsi.
If you want to cut your costs, you shouldn't be drinking sodas.
That's also a fair point.
You should quit drinking sodas. You'll lose some weight, and you will have a little bit more money at the end of the month. Last month, Target also warned that its profits would be lower because of inventory markdowns. So you've got these big retailers who are, it's bad news for their stockholders because the company's not making as much profit. But in order to move product, they feel like they've got to cut prices off the shelf in order to get people to consider buying things that are just sitting there gathering dust. A bunch of laundry detergent that just sits there isn't any good to the store. So they would rather go ahead and start, low prices. What do they call it? Roll back the prices, and hope that somebody will actually make a purchase and move that inventory. So that's what's happening out there. So that's good for customers, but of course none of this is good in the overall sense because, we're getting slammed with higher prices everywhere. The Federal Reserve is expected to act aggressively this week, this is what we were talking about before, to rein in, quote-unquote, rising prices. It ain't going to do that.
No, of course not.
With another large
It'll
rate
make them
increase.
Slightly less bad.
A move that risks tipping the economy into recession. Now, this is the other thing I was mentioning. That
I can't wait. You do your whole stupid thing. I've basically got a trial against you idiots coming up in 4 months.
Yeah.
Just keep wrecking the economy, man.
Make it worse. Make it so every one of those jurors is feeling the pinch.
Yeah.
Brought on by the government.
Bravo, golf clap for the government all around for just having absolutely no self-awareness or sense of self-preservation.
So this idea of recession is something that's been getting shares on social media recently that I've seen. The White House press secretary I was mentioning to you earlier that never answers a question straight has been asked by the media some good questions, actually, about what's the definition of of a recession, and she won't answer the question.
I sort of saw this one in some news article recently where they're like, we don't technically meet the qualifications of a recession because of this obscure reason or whatever.
Well, according to what they used to say prior to this current situation, what they used to say, it was 2 consecutive quarters where GDP of the economy was negative. So as long as there's 2 negative quarters in a row, they consider that, or they did, consider that a recession. And that has actually been brought up to these spokespeople for the government, and they just they play it off like, oh, no, that's not what, moving on. They just don't want to talk about it.
I don't know in what crazy ways they define recession, but the United States and the world in general is absolutely in a recession where you cannot shut down economies for months at a time, disrupt supply chains, inflate the currency, and then have a war between Russia and Ukraine without also getting a recession in that process. There is a recession going on, and it's not going away. Never mind the truckers who could cross into the United States to deliver the stuff in the first place. Yeah, there's a recession, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And it was all created by government policy.
Every bit of it, yeah.
Let's go to Sarah. She's in New Mexico. Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Yes, I've been hearing that out of the Ukrainian soldiers, there's people that are giving up their locations to the Russians to bomb where the soldiers are.
So you're saying the Ukrainian soldiers have turncoats who are working for the Russians?
Well, I've been hearing that a couple of times, even from President Zelensky. There's a couple of them that are pretending to be, they are soldiers in Ukrainian, but they're actually working for the Russians, right? So,
Sarah, whose side are you on in this conflict?
Well, isn't it obvious that
No,
I'm
not at
for
all.
the Russians?
Okay, you are for the
It's
Russians?
very obvious.
Okay.
So I'm bringing up.
I mean, most of the leftists that I know are hardcore for Ukraine.
Well, that is true. She's different in that way.
Okay, so why are they the Ukrainians are fighting for capitalism. The Russians are fighting for communism. So, or socialism.
Oh, that's right.
So then,
Sarah believes that the Russians are still secretly communist.
That's right. The USSR is reforming.
They're still alive.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay, Sarah, I don't believe you really believe that, but kudos
Why
to
wouldn't you believe? What, you think she's putting us
because
on?
of how? Yeah, I kind of.
You think Sarah's a character? You don't think she's real?
I do until she says stuff like, well, "Isn't it obvious? I'm obviously for Russia because they're the communists." At which was like, okay. It's a very elaborate troll, and kudos to you.
I think she's real. I don't think I don't think Sarah's a troll.
well, look, they just threw out Starbucks and McDonald's. Okay, so they're capitalist.
No, they didn't throw out
in
McDonald's.
America.
McDonald's chose to leave. McDonald's said, "Oh, well, we want to signal to our buyers in the rest of the world that we don't like what the Russian government's doing, so we're going to punish the Russian people, who of course have no say in what Putin is actually doing. We're going to punish the people of Russia by closing 800 stores and then just leaving."
Oh, is that how many there? But now it's a state-owned restaurant, from what I was told. It's government-subsidized restaurant. You pay
really?
I think from what I'm hearing,
The people's McChicken. So what? Even if they did socialize the McDonald's. I mean, this is the socialist victory here. It's the socialized McNuggets.
Well, I'm very convinced that Russia is communist. So is China, and they're all gonna back.
But she won't move there. Thanks for the call, Sarah. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can bring up whatever you want. I'm going to question her claim about McDonald's, or the new McDonald's in Russia being state-owned. We'll see what we can find out about that. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you ever say, "I could care less," when you really mean the opposite? You mean to say, "I couldn't care less." It's a common mistake. You are judged by how you speak, especially if you're looking for work, with so many more applicants than openings now. But even if you're not, avoiding common misstatements will help you make the most of the dozens of conversations and transactions that crowd your daily routine. So whatever you say, don't say "whatever" as a single word sentence. It's the most annoying expression in the American English language, according to a recent poll. And avoid cliches like the plague. Just kidding. But seriously, at the end of the day, you'll want to avoid this scenario, sounding like everyone else. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
Who is playing dress up as a guess?
Superhero.
Ninja.
Yeah.
A border ninja.
See, that would be the problem. Somebody else would dress up like a pirate, and then there would be a war.
Yeah. Just the pirates duking it out.
Wait, well, what do the pirates have against ninjas?
Ninjas and pirates are like matter and antimatter. They can't be together.
Okay.
I have a feeling the ninjas would just whoop it up on the pirates.
Are you kidding? Pirates, man.
Oh, the pirates do have cannons. They have the long-range attack ability, but once you get in close...
It's hard to be tougher than a pirate, though.
The pirates are certainly tough, but the agility I don't think is there.
Lose
they sit around on a
lose
ship
a hand, lose a leg, you can still get 200 people to be afraid of you as you stomp around with half of your, an eye patch, one hand, one leg. You stomp around half a person, and you're still commanding 200 people.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and you can join us here and bring up anything in the remaining moments at 603-283-6160. Wasn't expecting to talk about the new Russian McDonald's. It's not called McDonald's, but...
Thank you, Sarah.
But I was curious. She does bring up some topics. I was...
Yeah, she's usually wrong about them, but
Yes.
she does bring them up, and they're sometimes worth talking about.
And I'm pretty sure she's wrong about the claim that it is somehow a state-owned thing. She really wants to believe that Russia is this secret communist place.
I would be shocked if it doesn't belong to the same people they belonged to before, only they lost their right to franchise it as a McDonald's or whatever, and now they're calling it, McPutin or some nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you pretty much have summed it up based on what I've seen here in the last 5 minutes I've been researching this, which is that, of course, for listeners that don't know, McDonald's made a big stink about closing their stores in Russia because, well, the Russian president invaded Ukraine, and so there was this whole big corporate...
and that's amazing, right? I've never seen a corporation they cut off their noses to spite closed 800 stores. That's a huge market, and they were just like, "Yep, we're going to pull out of that entirely and not do business there anymore." Pepsi did the same, Visa did the same, a lot of these companies did the same, and it's like that runs counter to every free market principle I've ever heard of in my life, that these companies exist. These evil corporations that we're told about, they exist just to make profit. Well, that clearly cannot be true.
They're clearly in existence to, I guess, fillet the American government, basically, like, to be their bitch.
I mean, that's what I would expect from corporatism, right?
Yeah,
where they will do whatever the U.S. government wants them to do because they're part of the same corporate entity.
Right. This government, our mommy government over here in the United States, is our favorite government, and so we want to show our solidarity with them, and we're literally to drop how many billions of dollars off of our corporate revenue sheet or whatever.
I mean, it could have been small amounts, right? McDonald's is huge.
So, according to this, and by the way, McDonald's has a big history in Russia. If you remember, it was at the time of the end of the Soviet Union when, it sucks in communism. You're dealing with bread lines and stuff like that, right? Like, it's terrible.
If there's even food to get.
Right, it's terrible. And now, all of a sudden, you can have a McDonald's.
That's the tragic thing, right? Like, the McDonald's opening there in the first person, those were huge deals.
Yeah. It was a big deal. Like, I can even remember that. I was a kid, at the time when that happened. But I remember that the sort of the monumentousness of that occasion. That was like such a big deal. The story was that people that went in there couldn't even fathom. Right? They didn't even know what it was like to order a thing from a service-based restaurant like that. That didn't exist. They could not, seeing items on a menu with numbers next to them.
That was in stock.
Yeah. It just was absolutely unfathomable by the people that went there, but obviously over the years they got used to it, and then McDonald's was successful, and it expanded to hundreds of restaurants. And then all of a sudden, because of one little conflict somewhere in the world, they closed their entire business down, ultimately selling it off, according to the Wikipedia article about what is now called, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, Vksno Itochka, which apparently translates roughly to tasty and that's it. That is the name.
Well, they're lying. I don't know. McDonald's, I guess it is tasty. It is good. It's not gourmet food, but it's what you would expect.
And apparently it is like somebody related to the old franchisee of the McDonald's there that had the rights to McDonald's.
He probably doesn't want to have his name on it in case this all blows over.
His name is Alexander Govor. Apparently they have sold their stores to him. So maybe he's involved with this other syndicate or whatever, I don't know. But then they had a bunch of discussions over what the new name should be, and they released a new logo, and some people say the new logo looks a lot like a letter M. And
weird.
Yeah. Well, it's not weird. It's like,
No, it's sarcastic weird.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so they are using...
I'm surprised they even bothered. Just turn it sideways or whatever.
According to... the general director of the chain, at the initial stage of opening, restaurants will not carry every menu item that they had originally planned due to supply chain issues. According to their quality manager, the dishes contain the same ingredients and are made with the same equipment as when McDonald's operated the restaurants, but are served with different packaging. They obviously do not use the same brand names, so they've changed the names of the items on the menu. But
why even bother? It's not like McDonald's can sue them in Russian courts or whatever. And even if they do, the Russian court would be like, hey, get out. Imperialist pig dog or whatever they would call them.
Yep, so now they're calling it, instead of the Quarter Pounder with cheese, it's now the Grand Burger. And instead of the Filet-O-Fish, it's now the Fish Burger. Instead of the McChicken, it is the Chicken Burger. And instead of the Seriously Chicken, it is the Chicken Premier.
What is the Seriously Chicken? This is the first time I've ever heard of that. Okay.
No clue. Instead of the McWrap, it's the Caesar Roll, and so on. So that's it.
The only thing I've heard about McDonald's in recent years was when they attempted these, quote, menu hacks, and I hate saying that. I hate how everyone refers to everything as hacks, but you could order like
You're talking about the secret menu items?
Yeah, the lead, air, and sea. They actually added these things to DoorDash, and I was never brave enough to try one because, well, temporarily. No one liked them. They all hated them. Like, you would order the land, air, and sea burger, which is a burger, or land, air, and sea burger. It's a burger patty with a McChicken and a fillet of fish, right? Yeah, absolutely disgusting. And
there's a reason it's not on the menu.
Right. But they wouldn't even do that. When you ordered the land, air, and sea burger, they would just sell you a fillet of fish, a McChicken, and a Quarter Pounder.
Separately,
whatever.
And you have to put it together?
You'd have to put it together
That's
yourself.
stupid.
And then you'd have like 2 entire leftover pieces of buns or
That's
whatever
ridiculous.
that you didn't even need. So it was really
no
like
secret.
And that's if you're courageous enough to eat fish, chicken, burger in the first. I don't even want to eat turducken. And what I've heard is that's actually pretty good.
I want to go to the phones here. Unscreened caller, you're on in the remaining moments here. Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Ron.
Ron, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, is it Ariella?
Aria, yeah.
The lady's name? Aria? Okay. Do you refer to yourself as a lady or a guy, or what's your prefix, I guess is the best way to say it?
I generally don't refer to myself in the third person.
Whoa. Yeah, but were you right when you him or her or what?
Well, that would be referring to myself in the third person, right? Do you regularly call yourself he or him or she or her?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. See, because I don't. Because if I went back to my house or whatever, I would be like, I took her home. I'd be like, I went home, because I speak in first person perspective.
Okay. Well, we're getting into semantics, and that's not my point.
What is your point?
You talked about Biden earlier. People accusing Biden of being responsible for our fuel prices and that sort of thing. But if you remember, if you go back to when he was campaigning, he was going to wage a war on fossil fuels. And now, he's got that war going on, and we're paying the price of it.
It was Congress that passed all of the big bailouts, right? The trillions of dollars during both Trump and Biden.
Yeah, they did.
Right. Biden signed it, and so did Trump.
On the subject of Biden's campaign promises, I have no idea what the hell that dude promised while he was running. I paid zero attention to anything except his buffoonery and gaffes.
Well, here's the thing: aside from the buffoonery, he's cut down on our oil production in this country. We were exporting oil and oil products based on the oil we were pumping out of this country.
I don't even have an oil company.
Which is crazy, right? Like exporting oil when you can use it right here is a crazy thing to do, isn't it?
Well, if you can make money off of it. But the point is we had enough oil in excess that we're sending it overseas.
But that's not
Who's we, though?
That's not true. They were also importing oil from overseas. Why would you do that?
I mean, we're not the Soviet Union. You don't have any oil. Some American company may have had some oil, but you didn't have anything. There is no we here. Mm-hmm. There's no the people's oil.
Well, we the people, the government.
That's straight up communism, man.
Wait, you're not the government, are you?
I'm part of the government.
Oh, really? You work for them?
Part of the government. Are we not?
What agency do you work for?
At one time.
Oh, see, I'm a private citizen. An individual.
Yeah. I'm not even a citizen. There's no such thing as a citizen.
I wish I hadn't used that word.
Citizen's a lie.
Do you pay taxes?
What I do under duress is irrelevant.
Yeah. Do you know what a citizen is, sir? Can you define it?
Pay taxes. I mean,
can you define citizen?
Taxes.
Well, they'll shoot me if I don't. But what's the definition of citizen?
You belong to a country.
Oh, so I'm their property?
No,
that's even worse than the real definition, is I'm the government's property.
I'm sorry to tell you, and I wish we had more time to talk. Unfortunately, you called right at the end of the show. So if you want to talk further about this, call us tomorrow night. But the definition of a citizen is one who owes a duty of allegiance in return for an obligation of protection. Go ahead, look it up. Don't take my word for it. And that's true in law dictionaries, and it's true in just a normal dictionary. That's what a citizen is. And the government has said many times, the U.S. federal government, Supreme Court has said many times, they have no obligation to protect you. None whatsoever. And so if they have no obligation to you, how can you have a duty to them? Something to think about. See you tomorrow night. Online in the meantime, you can join us over at freetalklive.com.
Are you tired